March 1st special meeting of the Granada Community Services Board of Directors is called to order. Roll call, please. Chuck?
Oh. Director Dye.
Present.
Director Seaton.
Here.
Board President Warren.
Present.
Director Blanchard.
Here.
And Director Clark.
Here.
And my name is Chuck Duffy. I'm the General Manager.
Okay, general public participation. Do we have any comments for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to item one.
For board members, I might have some questions in terms of to make sure that it's on the agenda. Number one, I guess, would be planning the next parks meeting. I mean, should we? I feel like, you know, eventually we don't need to meet all the time, but early on, the more we meet, we kind of get that momentum going. So I would say, you know, if we do another parks only meeting, I feel like there's so many topics, like you said, that would require so many agenda items on their own that it shows that, you know, I feel like most of what we met on before was, you know, we were talking about drone policy and gun policy and dealing with rangers and stuff, right? So we didn't get into the specifics. We were dealing with so much back end for a year and a half almost that, so yeah, I guess that would be the first thing. Can we talk about that now, planning the next meeting?
Yeah, and let me follow up
Okay.
on that, David. And I want everyone to understand, this is probably going to be a little bit of a long meeting tonight, so I'll ask everyone to try and stay focused. We're not going to solve every parks issue tonight. Our goal is to take an overview, obviously get the pack going, and part of the broader goal is to have the pack get reformed again, if you will, work together to put together a plan to make recommendations to the board. And to that point, David, yeah, I think we're going to have more of these moving forward, because I've heard from multiple board members, including yourself, that we want to keep this thing moving along. So yeah.
Does the rest of the board feel like we met another month, whether it was before or after our next board meeting?
Yeah, so I think what we'll do is after this meeting, we've got our regular meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay, there you go.
We'll have Delia send around a meeting, email talking about whether we want future meetings or not, or if not, we'll talk about it certainly at the next board meeting.
Okay.
I think there's broad support. Someone tell me wrong. I think we need to have more of these parks only meetings, certainly just kind of kick off and keep this momentum we've got started.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like other comments kind of I heard in terms of us being more involved in the parks process is maybe, you know, like we have our special meetings sometimes in advance, or our, you know, closed session. Maybe before we do our next meeting, we do an hour before, where instead of this format, speaking, time limits, all that's more, we're all around the table with the new committee and kind of could go back and forth on things instead of, you know,
Okay.
I just feel like it's a better format sometimes.
I think there's a Brown Act problem with that.
So how do we get around it? Televise it?
It's not a televised issue. I think what we're looking for is kind of initially broad direction from the board
Yeah.
to the pack on where we want to go and what we want to do.
Yeah.
From what I understand, and I don't want to go too far into this because this is public comment, so you know I just want to keep it till we're talking about future meetings. But you know, the PAC already has a pretty good idea of what you've all been researching in the past 2 years, and you've almost got I don't call it a fully formed plan, but close enough. So that's what we'll be looking at. So, yeah. Yep.
I also want the PAC to have a certain amount of independence, to not feel that they have to sort of check in with us. I think they're going to have a lot of tasks to do, and I completely agree with you that we need to have the meetings we need to have, but I'd like to give them some time to sort of figure out their scope of work and figure out how they're going to work together. Because
Yeah.
I think what they're doing, what they're going to do, we need to value their product as well without necessarily.
No, absolutely. I think it was just in response to some, you know, us, you know, comments kind of that we could do a better job, even in the sense that sometimes, you know, they'll get direction in a piece of paper and it's kind of broad, right? I mean, sometimes, you know, a couple questions and it's like, oh, okay, that clarifies a lot.
Yeah, and let's not go too far.
Yeah.
We got item 3.
Okay,
item 5 we can talk.
So,
And
okay, so we'll
I'm
talk
gonna
about
turn
the
the meeting
meeting.
over to Leonard because somehow I started running it.
Okay, so okay, does this also fall under, I guess, item 6 would be, things like, you know, I wrote an email to you, Chuck, but Clipper Ridge, that was an example of where Sam had talked about I remember at the
that
time.
would fall under item 5.
So all those things could fall under item 5, volleyball
It could be
courts.
direction to the PAC to investigate that.
Talking about the progress of the volleyball, where that's
Yeah,
at.
that's on
Okay.
item 6 or 7. Yeah.
Okay.
It's on 5.
Okay. Yeah.
No, volleyball has its own, I think.
Oh, well,
Yeah, that's 7.
oh, yeah,
Okay,
7,
7.
sorry, yes.
But basically, the one broad one, we could go pretty broad in terms
Yes.
of the scope of what, okay.
Yes.
So then that should be fine.
And after number 7 is the item we recently added to all agendas, which is about future park agenda items and meeting dates. So that's actually on the agenda.
Okay, as Chuck said, this could be a long meeting. I'm gonna declare that we will have a hard stop at 10 o'clock. Which means that I'm gonna try and keep things moving, and when people and directors repeat themselves, I'm gonna cut them off. If they say the same thing repeatedly, I'm gonna cut them off. So, with that said, I've in the past, in past terms, both as MCC chair and as president of this board, tried to do things a little more informally, because I think that usually serves the public interest better. I don't know how practical that's going to be with this many people here and this much of an agenda tonight. So we'll see what we can do. So we will move on to agenda item 1, consideration of appointing Parks Advisory Committee PAC members for the 2018-19 two-year term. Director Clark and I were the committee, I don't know that it was ever formally given a name, but
I think the name is ad hoc.
right. And so with the report that we're about to hear, the committee will be dissolved as ad hoc committees work. And so we did interview 10?
Oh, 9.
9. And so Director Clark will cover the rest of the report.
Yes, it took some time to arrange, to get in enough applications, basically. We received 13. One person had a change of his business or his workload and withdrew, and two people who applied didn't respond to setting up an appointment for an interview. So we interviewed 9 people, and one who was not in town at the time we did not interview. I'm going to cut to the chase. The ad hoc committee recommends that the 4 incumbents who applied and were interviewed be reinstated on the committee. That's Chair Pat Turney, Vice Chair Paul Kolsch, Owen Moore, and Dale Ross. And these people have demonstrated a great deal of interest. They put in a lot of time. They've shown a work ethic, the ability to listen and learn from others, and they have expertise in various, particularly Pat, in various aspects of this Parks and Rec portion of the district's responsibility. They do give us 2 younger people who have pretty small children, which is a good constituency to respond to. And then, but they do also have something in common, which is pretty obvious. So we're recommending that some women be put on the advisory committee. And those would be Fran Pollard, who has got...
So we're not voting on...
Could you not interrupt
Okay.
him?
No, he's making his recommendation.
Okay, and then we're gonna vote on it.
recommending,
Okay.
I'm recommending. Fran Pollard, who's got more experience than probably the rest of us combined in this kind of stuff here in Granada, and a great record for persistence.
Yes.
Susanna Cantrell has a great education. She has grandkids who come here often, and she has a number of activities that she's particularly pays attention to because she participates, and I think she'd be another great member.
Could she
And-
possibly, if she's here, could she raise her hand? Because I don't know her. Susanna Cantrell here?
I think
and-
she was planning on coming and she got sick, and so she didn't want to spread anything, and so
So,
I
that's
think
flu.
she's still fully interested, but
And we recommend Nancy Marsh, who is active and a retired person, but has a great record of working with diverse people and in the committee and smaller committee type venues, and is eager to do public service. So those are our recommendations. Pat Tierney, Paul Koch, Owen Moore, Dale Ross, Fran Pollard, Susanna Cantrell, and Nancy Marsh. But I would also like to say that those of you who, basically it was an embarrassment of riches. Everybody that we interviewed would be a good addition to the committee. And so we had to choose some people, and we went back and forth, and this is what we came up with. But you folks who applied, and we didn't recommend, hang in there. We're not throwing these applications away because things change. And the fact that we only had 4 people from the previous committee who reapplied shows that we get replacements. So, and I thank everyone for their interest.
Discussion, Barbara.
I'd just like to thank the committee for doing all that work of doing the interviews and so forth, and I respect your recommendations. I'm prepared to support it.
David?
yeah, I think number one, I think for sure the 4, I'm all for limits, and I think every 2 years is fine, but I think we have to recognize we were so slow in terms of us launching parks that and those 4 were totally committed and, gave it their all, so I think that's a no-brainer. Other than that, I feel like, I was kind of thinking about that, and then having to vote on who else, I felt like everyone else we had some really qualified people. The one thing I was gonna say that I felt was interesting, that in terms of representing a huge constituency that was interesting was Michelle. I felt like just in terms of her, talking about, different things with the skate parks and the surf community and things like that. I think it's important because, we might not get a skate park, but having somebody like that on the board is gonna, on the pack, it's gonna be able to say, listen, we tried hard to get a skate park. Let's be happy that we got a pump track coming. Maybe there's land in 10 years that we could do a skate park on, but that's we tried to do it, it's just not going to work out because there are going to be people upset with different things. And I feel like just having that, I felt like the direction of the conversation I had with her, just her viewpoint provides a huge span of geographic of constituencies that I think would feel like they have a voice in that. And so that was the only other one where I just felt like all things equal in terms of some of the people had some really good qualifications and board level experience, and I just felt like for that reason I found it interesting, even in terms of I think like the best skateboarder of all time, Tony Hawk, has a place here, right? His brother has expressed interest, who's built tons of skate parks and has really went into with governments and went through the process to make sure to explain all the insurance liability side of things to the low cost design side of things. Like I said, there's been different things like that might take so long, who knows? But just being able to have that voice and say, hey, we're willing to tap in and listen, right? And explore things. I just feel like that's something that is important. I feel like by not having that, it's something that could cause problems down the road in terms of really trying to not just get the best board members based on experience, but also saying, okay, let's look at given if they're equally qualified, kind of their main kind of voice that they're representing. So that was my only other thing in terms of I'm open to any other, the 4 we got. With that being the 5th, I feel like that was kind of my initial kind of thought, whereas everyone else I felt like was super qualified in their own ways, that was unquestionable, but all kind of had the same views in terms of what the focus of their conversation was on. It was kind of similar, and that was the only difference and distinction that I noted. I don't know if you guys kind of saw that in terms of.
Yeah, I was just waiting to see if David would run out of ways to say the same thing over and over again. Barbara?
I was just going to say that, yes, some very qualified people were not included, but we're looking for the committee now to do a lot more public outreach. So hopefully, these people will still stay involved and engaged and participate in what the committee's going to be doing, because I think we finally achieved a point where the committee has the authority to really move forward on stuff. So hopefully these people that
absolutely.
you're talking about and others will continue to participate, because the opportunities are going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the second thing I was going to say in terms of, I feel like this, the PAC being kind of the outreach arm of kind of, being the initial voice of getting things out, that anyone that is an elected part of the voting group still can become an advisor for different kind of specialty roles, which just keeps more people involved. And so when we do events or whatever else.
Meetings are open to the public.
No, for sure, but I just feel like that level of having people that are, just loosely accountable to the PAC committee gives us that many more people that are fully invested in what we're doing in terms of showing up to events, helping maintain projects, and just kind of being involved, I think. So I feel like that's something that I know they have the authority to do. Is that something you guys are willing to do, is expand non-voting? They don't even have to go to meetings, but it would be something where, there you go, where they could do one presentation on something focused like beach cleanup or pump tracks or whatever else it is, and maybe present to us, depending on it, but just to have that
Yeah,
level
and
of.
remember, that's kind of the overriding thing, is the board's gonna give general direction, so you guys are also.
No, yeah.
The PAC committee are also.
And that's what I see in
free to-
terms of them presenting to the PAC and then the PAC
Yeah, absolutely.
summarizing a presentation of their.
Because we've got,
The PAC can and probably should, and I think they did this to some extent, form subcommittees for, I don't want to say
absolutely.
narrower interest, but
I think like a
more
pump track.
focused.
And I think that's
interests.
exactly what it needs. I
And
think that's
so-
the best example.
So those subcommittees
Yep.
could rope in members of the community with more focused
Yeah,
interests,
yeah.
for each subcommittee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jim?
Yes, well, I support the 4 that already had done the job. I appreciate their work before, and I support the 3 women that have been nominated. Everybody's very well qualified, so I just repeat this. But again, these meetings are open to the public, and you are encouraged to come, so don't look at this as being a negative. Look at the more you get involved, the more chance you have of being involved next time. So please come again to the meetings.
And Matthew, you probably don't have anything else to add.
Well, I would like to say I agree with most everything that Director Seaton said. They're really, the other people were this close, all of them, and Michelle in particular had what you brought up largely about, she has a lot of tentacles out in various communities, and would be a really good publicity person.
Wasn't Michelle one of the harder ones to schedule, though, for the interviews? And
Well, yeah.
So I thought we had some
she was
concern about.
so busy doing things with various communities that, yeah.
Yeah, so, I had a little bit of concern as to whether she'd be able to make it to all the meetings. And, so if she can make it to the meetings, she can still participate as a member of the public. But,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
if she misses a lot of meetings and she's a committee member, that leaves the committee short.
Yeah.
So, is there a motion?
Who wants to make the motion? I feel like your committee should make the motion.
Oh. Yeah, I was going to ask how we're proceeding. I'll move that we appoint to the Park Advisory Committee for the term running from, well, it should have started in January, through December 19,
19?
2019.
2019, yeah.
Oh,
Pat Tierney, Paul Kolsch, Owen Moore, Dale Ross, Fran Pollard, Susanna Cantrell, and Nancy Marsh.
A second.
okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'm gonna hope there's no further discussion. Those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions?
Okay.
Motion carries 5-0. Item 2.
Congratulations and thank you to
Yeah,
all who applied.
And thank you for applying.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Item 2, consideration of revisions to Parks Advisory Committee General Rules and Procedures. Chuck?
Okay. So at our last meeting, your board requested some clarifications on our, let me get to it, Leonard. On our Parks Advisory General Rules and Procedures, so we've incorporated those corrections, if you will. We changed the even-numbered fiscal years to calendar years because it made more sense. We made it more clear that the members who served the previous two-year term are not automatically reelected. They have to stand for election again.
Appointment and reappointed? You said election.
Okay, reappointment. Are we gonna make this meeting longer? Short. And then I just made a couple other minor things. So I'm incorporating the board's comments from our February meeting. I would recommend approval of the changes we've submitted.
I would like to add something to the meetings paragraph.
Okay?
All meetings of the committee will be video recorded, which means you have to make sure the the assistant general
So
manager.
you want me to just add a sentence?
Sure.
Okay?
But somehow you're gonna have to make sure that actually happens.
Can it be an iPhone recording?
It needs to be PCT.
Can you get an iPhone onto the PCT?
I don't know, but the
I'll
sound
fig-
quality is
I'll-
poor,
I'll
and the
figure
sound
it
is the
out.
important.
I just know the last meeting, like the one I was at, was somebody did take out a cell phone and start recording the whole thing.
And
so I was just
I've
wondering.
asked, Julia didn't say how it was recorded, I
Yeah.
didn't know it was an iPhone, but I've asked Julia to get that recording, and I've asked her more than once, and I've not heard back. So apparently she's unable to get that video, so it doesn't matter that it was recorded if we can't get it.
Okay, so but either way-
I'll add that sentence, and I'll actually look at something, we can get a cheap camera if Steve's not available.
Yeah,
if CCTV 's
or-
not available. That way we'll have it on a relatively high quality
Or if we
format,
have a-
and we can upload it to YouTube.
Yeah, if we have a scheduling conflict or whatever, the
Right,
meeting
that's
won't
what
be
I mean.
canceled as long as one of them makes sure that they
Yeah.
record it from the beginning and that gets to us right away.
Yeah, so I'll look into that. So I'll add that sentence, Leonard.
Okay. Any comments from other directors?
Move approval.
It's been moved, is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, any further?
As amended?
As amended.
All right. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, abstentions, motion carries 5-0. Item 3, report on Parks Advisory Committee accomplishments and activities for the previous term. So it's
So
my
Director-
understanding that,
Yeah, Director Dye asked for this to be put on, and she put together a nice summary, so I will turn it over to Barbara.
Well, there were a couple ways to do this. One way would have been to just list accomplishments, of which there were many. But I also thought it was important for people to sort of see the process that the committee went through in their hard work from the 2 years, most of which I served on the committee before I was appointed to this board. So I just thought quickly I'd go through sort of what happened at the various meetings and what was accomplished. So the first meeting was in October 6, 2016. Everyone introduced themselves after being selected. They listened to background information provided both by GCSD and the county. And at that time, the county was the partner of GCSD in implementing the parks programs. So GCSD was working directly with the county. They were the staff to do the parks work. They looked at maps of the medians and assigned the various committee members to go investigate the various medians. So everybody took their homework and went and walked the medians that they were assigned and prepared reports. The committee was also concerned about the health of the trees on the medians, and the original notion was to focus on medians 8 and 11. And so at that first meeting, they asked the county for information on the health of the trees on those medians. On the next meeting, the second meeting, there was public comment requesting a pump track. There was a presentation by the ADA compliance officer for San Mateo County Parks about issues regarding ADA compliance in parks. And I'm hoping that that presentation might still be available, or if we could replicate it for the committee, because I remember it was very interesting and helpful.
Where was it presented?
It was presented to the committee by the
To-
county parks
to
ADA
the PAC.
compliance officer,
To-
to the Parks Committee. These are what the Parks Committee did. These are things the Parks Committee did. They heard a presentation on ADA compliance issues.
You know, if that particular meeting was videoed?
I'm not sure the video had started at that point. I think our first few meetings were not videotaped. Is that everyone's memory? Yeah, yeah, may not have been.
Yeah, I just counted dates shown in your report here, and there's 10 dates, if I counted correctly, and there's 5 meeting videos from PCT on YouTube.
I think that's right. I think the first ones were not videotaped, but I think it's good. So then there were proposals so the county came back with proposals to review the trees, and the committee chose one and voted to ask for a report on the trees for the condition of the trees in medians 8 and 11. One of the committee members had an idea of a project to paint the utility boxes, and immediately the problem came up of getting permission to do so, because the utility boxes belong to several different utilities, and it was very difficult to reach the people who could provide the information. At the next meeting, this is really interesting, and something I might recommend that the committee do again, is all the people in the committee came in with their personal ideas of what could be improved and changed in terms of parks in El Granada. They reviewed the report from the tree service, which said that the trees on median 11 have reached the end of their life cycle and should be removed, and that the trees on median 8 are healthy and need pruning. And then this is the first time the difficult issue of the ownership of the medians and the county role came up. So it came up very early as an issue. On February 8th, we had more public comment about a pump track, more discussion of the utility box painting project, and that's the board had asked the committee to come up with a priority list for recreational options within the community. And so they started working on that. They took public comment, including support for purchasing the Impink parcel, which is the parcel next to the preschool, which in fact was purchased by GCSD later. There was public comment on having a pump track and additional recreational options. And that's where county staff suggested that GCSD take over Clipper Ridge Park. And the county had budgeted $10,000 to improve the basketball court, which I think was done.
Let me note that before we got the reorganization to a CSD on the ballot, I had suggested that we contact the Clipper Ridge HOA and see if they wanted us to take it over, and that would only be fair because they're still paying the same amount towards Parks and Rec that everybody else is, and yet their HOA fees, I think, largely go to support the park there, so it makes sense from a fairness point of view for the district to take over the responsibility for that, and then they would cut their HOA fees.
Right. Well, I think the basketball court was improved, but GCSD has not taken over that park, right?
Well, it's.
No, we've never heard of it.
Remember Sam stood up the one night from county and
Yeah.
said, it's your guy, and I remember even saying, oh, this would probably take,
This is
2
low-hanging
years.
fruit.
And he's
Yeah.
like, no, we could do this, and hey, well, I'll get with Chuck, we could do this in a couple months. And that was, but still though, I mean, I do have questions in terms, what does responsibility mean? Does it mean just the nets and the court, or does it mean any of the grass or any areas? And I assume, so we're not getting anything additional? We're just,
Particularly, all I had in mind was whatever the HOA currently pays for having done, we would take over that part.
Just on the court, not the
I
cutting
don't
grass?
know. The county does some of the work on their own, and some of it is funded by the HOA fees, and I don't know where the
Does
line is.
anybody here?
You know what, let's
come
put
from
it
the
on our
HOA?
list of
Yes.
priorities and talk about it when we talk about additional priorities. I'm making a note
So
of
I went
that
out,
because,
I actually went out and looked at the park today, it's actually nice.
Yeah.
yeah,
Everything's,
and it's been
Did it have a
fixed.
net up? Did it have
It had
a
a
net?
net.
Okay, because I know before that was one of the
Yeah,
things.
For what it's worth, the HOA fees weren't enough to do anything, that's why the county sent.
okay, so, yeah, but if anyone's got a contact, Barbara's right, I don't think we wanna get into the weeds down here, but if anyone's got a contact from the HOA, send them to us and we can start discussions.
And before, we had someone on the committee from Clipper Ridge, but I don't think we do
Okay.
this time, right?
We could at least contact her to find out who the current contact is.
Right. And then at that meeting, we also discussed, as requested by the board, acquisition priorities. And then at the next meeting, March 14th, 2016, the list of priorities that had been sent to the board was sent back with some minor revisions. So there was, and we're going to talk about that later in this meeting, but the list of priorities for what the Parks Committee was going to do was approved by the board. This county staff talked about what it was going to take to implement some of this stuff, and the committee identified members to work with the county on specific items. So members of the committee agreed to be the event liaison, the trail plan person, the median number 8 person, and the pump track person. And the committee created a list of acquisition priorities to go to the board. We're going to talk about that later in this meeting. In the April meeting, we mostly talked about a pump track on median 21 on Avenue Cabrillo. And there was public testimony in favor of it, and then public testimony raising some concerns. On July 19th, the committee talked about proposals for the median 8 circle, Balboa Circle. This is where the first discussion of the possible use of school district properties came up, because the school district has lots of land, or considerable land in El Granada, and the options for recreational use there are really significant. And it was proposed that there would be some meetings with GCSD staff and the school district to talk about the possibilities. And there was further discussion of the pump track on median 21. So you can see, I just want to make the point that the committee was really busy and doing significant and serious work here. On October 24th, the county agreement of the status of medians was still undetermined. The county presented 3 proposals for planning work for the medians, so to put together a plan for all the medians. And a subcommittee, which was myself and Dale Ross, was appointed to work with the county to review them. The committee approved a motion to replace the benches on median 6 and 7. And there was more discussion of a small park on median 8 and Balboa Circle. And the motion was approved to begin community outreach in the planning effort with a consultant. And then,
Let me throw in for the public that the directors received email from someone in the community asking, can we replace the benches? I guess he was probably talking about 6 or 7.
6 and 7 is, what the motion was, but whatever, yeah. But I don't think it actually happened. Yeah. And then there was a discussion of proposal to add recreational options to the Foothill parcel. This is what the school district suggested, behind Clipper Ridge. And there was quite a bit of public comment against the idea, and the committee decided that was not gonna work as an appropriate location.
Can you say that one more time? What
This was the
exactly?
parcel behind Clipper Ridge, it's called the Foothill parcel.
Okay.
And the school district said, well, maybe you could do some recreational stuff there, but then there was quite a bit of testimony that it really would impact the residents in that area, and that it was really difficult to access. I mean, there were the testimony was pretty clear that it was not really a viable option for
Is that
most.
the parcel that has the red watch on it?
No, it's up above.
So it's over here?
I think so. Yeah, over.
Yeah.
But when you say negative feedback, that was mainly from residents, not necessarily the school district. The school district.
No, the school district was proposing it, but the residents were against it, and the county people, there just was really difficult access.
And
You know,
against
was it-
what exactly though? What, I mean, I could see some things I'm being against, but what, against anything whatsoever, or against
More or
certain?
less.
certain things.
It's a parcel that has, habitat on it. It's
Okay.
really hard to access. It's very steep. There's just lots of problems with it. So
Okay.
it didn't seem like a real solution. to
Okay.
anything. Didn't really seem
I
like
went
a
out there a
bylaw.
decade ago
Okay.
with Dave Holland, the then county parks director, and there was something which was at least somewhat of a pump track there, and I understand a couple of years later, the school district had it bulldozed.
So, and then that was when there was feedback from the school district that they were not interested in selling or otherwise making part of their property in El Granada available for recreational uses. So that option was kind of off the table, at least at that point, unless further outreach was done. So at this point, the problem is happening that the county is saying that the medians belong to the adjacent property owners. GCSD legal staff does not agree with that. But the county at that point is saying that nothing could be done on the medians until an agreement had been reached regarding the status of the medians. And so that kind of put everything on hold that the committee was doing. So there was an agreement drafted that went back to the county. County staff said that all the things that had been proposed by the committee were acceptable, except they didn't want barbecues or disc golf, and that the agreement went forward for legal review and review by the county. And that was in February of 2017. And then there was a long period of waiting before that came back.
What year?
That was February of 2017.
When they started reviewing it.
Yeah.
Oh, because I thought you're still reporting over here in the 2016 meetings.
Well, I was talking about October. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I missed October. So this is where the county had come up with 3 proposals to do a master plan for the medians. And, no, we did talk about this. Dale Ross and I reviewed those proposals and came back to the next meeting. So the next meeting is where the county came up with the question of, where further discussion of what is the agreement going to be between GCSD and the county for the use of the medians. And that was, nobody knew what the answer was going to be, and it was moving forward, trying to negotiate an agreement. Our subcommittee did recommend that we select Gates as a consultant to create a master plan for the medians. But of course, Gates couldn't do a master plan for the medians until an agreement was reached with the county as to what GCSD was allowed to do in the medians. So it was kind of stopped there. So most of the forward progress was stopped. Someone proposed to go to the school district about pump track options on the district property, so we reviewed that proposal, but that didn't end up going anywhere. And then there was discussion of sand volleyball courts and discussion of the utility box painting project. Caltrans requirements came through, but they were incredibly detailed and difficult. And at this point, I don't think there was staff time to deal with them.
Can
And
you
then,
explain where Caltrans jurisdiction intersects with what's being discussed?
I think some of the utility boxes are Caltrans boxes. Is that true? This came from Delia.
Oh, that's only going to be one down here and maybe one at
But the point is, they
Capistrano.
did not
Most
get
of the
information on
rest
the
of them are-
other utility boxes. Like, how do you get permission to paint a utility box? Do you just go do it? Probably. And this is something the committee can think about again. This is I guess my point is, this kept coming up and people kept trying to do it and find out who owned the utility boxes so we could have a program to paint them.
Well,
Maybe the answer is we just have a program to
I would think that
paint them.
except for the Caltrans boxes, every box has stamped on it what it is and who owns it. And there's only 3 choices. The stupid little ones in people's front yards are Comcast. The giant ones blocking the paths on the Alameda are PG&E, or no, they're the phone company, whatever they're called this month. And, yeah,
So-
right.
so-
And I don't know that PG&E has any above-ground facilities. I think all PG&E facilities are below-ground vaults.
Well,
So
this was-
either
this-
way, what if, each one, that if there was any potential interest from any of the parties, we send all of them a
Well,
notice?
let's finish with the report.
Okay, I was just gonna say, saying we're gonna be paying these in the next 60 days. If
I-
you have an issue with this, please respond.
And I
if we
think
think
we
there could be
had
a vested interest.
one
we just
committee
send them
member
to
who
them.
took the lead on this, who is not continuing on the committee, and there just really wasn't staff time to follow up on the question of how do you actually get permission. So I would say this is another thing to talk about for the committee for the future, is this a project you want to continue with? And your idea of, saying we're going to just do it, or, continued work to try to get permission to do it. But it is a nice idea for a community effort to join together and paint the utility boxes. So the committee kind of finished up waiting for a resolve of the agreement with the county on the use of the medians. I think there was a lot of significant accomplishments. In the next agenda item, we're going to talk about the list of priorities that was sent to the board by the committee and then approved by the board with some minor revisions. And we'll look at that. It's a really good list. And I think the committee really did a lot of preliminary work, but I think this new committee is really going to take the work was done by the previous committee and take it to a whole new level, because I think there's a lot that's just about to happen, and it's going to be really exciting.
Thank you. Any questions, not discussion, but clarification questions for Barbara?
We did have a meeting scheduled for May 1st because of the
Microphone?
canceling issue.
Microphone?
Oh, yeah.
May 1st, this year or last year, Pat?
Yes, that was the last one I had on here. No progress on county agreement, discussion of general parameters of a pump track, which we talked about pump tracks a lot, and report on MCC meeting regarding a community center. So that was, and there may have been one more meeting, but there appear to be no minutes of the one additional meeting. So.
Oh, Chuck, one of the other things that I forgot about that I wanted in the procedures document is that the approved minutes from the committee meetings will be provided at the next regular board meeting in the packet.
The GCSD one?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Patrick.
I'm Patrick Tierney. What would the board like from PAC in terms of, are the minutes sufficient? Because in the minutes, we have identified resolutions that passed or failed that would be sent to the board. But is there even a briefer summary that would be more helpful to the board, that would just be addressing resolutions only?
I was thinking that topics that were discussed and conclusions reached. So, yeah, just so the board is aware of even what the committee is in the process of discussing.
So minutes would be your preference or something?
Well, there's different kinds of minutes, you know. It's,
Yeah, I just took, summaries of the minutes, because I didn't think we wanted to hear the whole minute. But yeah, the minutes were good. The minutes gave I think, a pretty good sense of what went on in the meetings.
If your minutes are more than action minutes, in other words, they include things besides motions, then that's probably sufficient.
Okay, they were.
So one of the things I was, in leading up to the meeting, trying to prepare myself for everything, I almost felt like I wish there was a simple either website or even a Google, share site where, like, all these things, I'm constantly wanting to grab the median information and all that, whereas I feel like that would be an important resource in terms of with the minutes and these documents that you put together and other documents that we give you guys, just have that one repository where everyone from the public, and honestly, it could be as simple as a Facebook page where we just post everything up there.
Some of us don't do Facebook.
Okay, then the top priority would be a website, a simple.
It's on our, we're going to talk about that on
Okay.
item 5, because that's actually one of the recommendations Pat and I
Okay,
made.
perfect. Yeah.
I see no
There you go.
reason why they.
Yeah, and in
is there-
case I forget about that,
Yeah.
yeah, on item 5, I want to talk about our website, because it's one of the
Is there a
tasks
Parks
I
tab
want
on
the
there?
board to task the PAC with, because we've got a woeful section on the website. It still talks about the CSD formation.
Is there a specific tab for
We need parks, I think, out there, so, yeah.
Chuck, is there a specific tab for parks?
There's a specific tabs for CSD, I can't remember, I was
No.
gonna change it to parks last week.
Well,
but I don't know if
you
this
might
really
want to
matters.
move that to some historical place and put on a Parks
Well, I'm
and Rec
going to,
tab.
but I need something to replace it with, so
Yeah.
I knew this meeting was coming up, so we've got to do a better job on the website, so.
I'd like to respond to Pat's question. I think it's good to have in the minutes resolutions that were discussed and passed, and resolutions that were discussed and not passed, because this board is taking the committee as representative of the community. So that's the best way for us to know what's the community support What are they not behind?
But
And
let me
your minutes are
emphasize,
pretty detailed, as I
E-
remember, right?
even
Yeah.
if something is
Of
discussed,
discussion, Yeah, so
if,
I think it's good to have, like Leonard said, in the GCSD packet.
Yeah.
you know, just a really brief mention of things that were discussed, even if they didn't lead to a motion. If the discussion occupied any significant committee meeting time, right, you know, something that you tossed in a minute or two, I wouldn't bother putting that in the minutes necessarily, but, you know, if you spend 20 minutes discussing something, I think that should be mentioned in the minutes. Okay, anything else on the report? Yeah. Okay, so now the thing that we've been waiting, I think literally years for.
Yeah.
Well, as Barbara just pointed out, we started February 2017. So.
Well, let me.
No, it was before that, this
Well, I
start,
know
the
that.
issue,
I meant
yeah.
when we really got serious and started putting pen to paper with the lawyers.
Let me point out, by the way, that I've been arguing with one of the deputy county councils at MCC meetings on this topic for probably around a decade, give or take 5 years. And guess who was right and who was wrong?
Well, the good news is,
Guess who brought it up?
yeah, we've got the agreement in hand, and I actually want to thank Delia chased us down with Nicholas Calderon from the county for the past year while we've been waiting for it. And as did Natalie Kirkish from Jonathan's office. She kept on Brian Wong, who's their county counsel. So we started this, I don't even remember when, but we put it down on paper sometime at the beginning of last year. Your board approved this version sometime in October-ish of 2017. And then we were chasing the county before that to get it nailed down. We've been chasing them, and finally they did indeed approve the agreement in mid-February. So that's good news. And part of the reason there's no real discussion item because your board previously approved it, the county approved it. So I just wanted to put it in the agenda kind of as a memorial, a record of what's happened, administrative record. So this is approved, and we're ready to go forward. Like Barbara said, and the PAC now has this supporting them, if you will.
And just to say, this gives GCSD permission to do, make improvements to the medians,
Yes,
Chuck,
in short.
which I think the legal staff that works for GCSD felt perhaps we had all along, but because this was a dispute with the county, now we really have it.
Right, it was just easier. They gave us
Yeah.
the catch-22, hey, we don't own them, they do, but we needed an agreement to work on them. But-
Chuck, can you put that agreement document online separately so people don't have to ferret it out of this packet?
Okay.
Dale, microphone.
When what?
I'm Dale Ross, and I'm on the recently appointed the PAC political, not political, but the Parks Advisory Committee. So, you know, the old trust but verify. So we've been hearing this for our members of the advisory committee for months and months and months. That well, we have it. We're near. But Chuck, when will we actually be able to see that document online and be able to download
This
it?
document?
It's here, it's in the agenda
It's in
pack.
the agenda. So the board of supervisors, county board of supervisors passed it in February.
It's here?
I didn't give enough drum roll.
Oh,
I
we didn't
guess.
get a copy?
Yahoo, it's done, we're good to
Yeah.
go.
Okay.
And here are our signatures.
And I will get it on the website next week.
It's done.
Put it on the board of
So the
supervisors
answer is next week.
Sorry, we needed more fancy.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, yay, finally.
Well, I should have named the item approval, they approved
Yeah.
it or something like that, but anyway.
So so they basically said generally you can do some of these, you can't do these, obviously anything, you know, what they say, GCSD has discretion to install improvements after completing the public process. What is the public process? Is it just a?
The public process is described somewhere else in the document briefly, David. And by the way, David, you had sent me an email,
Yeah.
and I had written back something about contractors. There's also a provision in here for volunteers. So we can
Okay.
do, if we do use a contractor, he has to be licensed, but if we use volunteers, it can just be
But
volunteers.
let's
Okay.
emphasize
I
that
wanted to clarify
that's
that.
not a blank check for people to go out and do stuff. It still has to be under direct supervision of the
Right.
district.
It's under our agreement with the county.
And permits must be obtained.
But what, okay, so I'm just wondering, so I guess it's gonna be completely new in terms of we're gonna have a permit that we fill out and list, because, you know, at some point, what type of
No.
inspections or approvals? I mean, if it could be, we could present them with the craziest, you know, potentials, and it's a playground, and I mean, what is their process in terms of feedback? So that, you know, or giving guidance, or?
Your board will have to decide along with the PAC what kind of public process you want. This board has historically, and still is now, always been very open to receiving public input. So if we decide to put a playground up in one of the medians, you know, it'll be publicly discussed, vetted, and all this kind of stuff, then we'll present that plan to the county.
Okay, is there a fee each time we do that?
There may be, we've been talking with them about this, the coastal development permit fees.
Okay.
We've been talking about trying to get some kind of blanket permit, so
Yeah.
I don't need a permit fee
Well,
for every swing we put
come
out
to
there.
think of
it,
bench,
Chuck,
that-
I just remembered, there's something called a program, well, I'm thinking of EIRs, but is there,
Programmatic
is there
EIRs.
any analog to that with CDPs?
There should be, you know, I think Don Horsley helped us out a lot, getting this median agreement through and getting it started, and so that's something certainly, you know, that you all have a better relationship with.
So potentially it could be one annual fee that we could submit?
No, just one plan where you put together a plan and you say, we can do this, 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 and here. It's kind of what a programmatic EIR is. You're describing it more in general terms than an actual thing, that we may put slides here and swings here and benches here.
Yeah.
You don't have exact stuff. And then if you get one CDP for that, it makes it
Okay,
cheaper,
yeah.
easier, quicker
Okay.
for everything.
And then potentially, once we have the CDP, if other things are to be done that weren't included in the original CDP, maybe we can amend it instead of
Yeah,
doing a
it might be a
whole
couple
CDP.
phases over
Right.
multiple years.
Doesn't happen
whereas our
outright,
phase
exactly.
one covers us for 2 to 3, 4 years.
Right, it allows us to do these uses and all included in that permit.
Okay,
Like
And
what-
the improvements, there's a list of approved improvements, which covers most of everything that the committee wanted to, you know, propose to do, except for barbecues and
Disc golf.
the disc golf. So all of the other things. Tree houses, benches, play areas, fencing, fitness stations, horseshoes, picnic tables, pump tracks, softball pitch and catch, spider web, rope net, climbing equipment, swing center, swing sets, tree maintenance, other landscaping, walking path improvements, water fountains, youth basketball, half court.
Archery.
You know.
but we
No,
need-
there's no archery.
We do need to work out something with the county so that we don't get dinged for these $4,000 permit fees.
Well-
For each thing.
Section 6 of this agreement, permit fee, says base permit fee pursuant to the terms of this permit, the base permit fee shall be waived in its entirety for the term of the permit and any options to extend such term.
All
So
right.
my only question is, what's
the
base
base
permit
permit?
fee versus other permits?
I would have to
The
ask
coun-
Jonathan.
the county probably has
That's
a-
interesting.
The county probably has a flexible
Well-
definition.
If.
Well, that's the
on other-
county permit. That's
But-
not a coastal development permit
Right.
or any.
Right, but they
you
have
know,
to
So
approve
the
those,
county's
too.
not gonna charge us a permit fee to approve what we wanna do. But that doesn't mean there might be CEQA fees or
Well,
coastal development
we
permits.
might want to do,
Well, I'll be walking in with that section again.
Right. Yeah.
maybe we want to do a program EIR, so we do that once.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, we would absolutely not do specific EIRs, there's no reason.
Now, with an interesting side effect of the county waiving the base permit fee is it means that the county staff isn't going to be interested in spending much time reviewing it, so they'll probably more or less rubber stamp everything that comes from us.
Well, I mean, right, and the list Barbara just read off is pretty innocuous, so I don't see any controversial projects that pop up, pretty inclusive.
The primary reason the permit fees exist is to keep the department in business.
All right.
So just continuing on, another kind of side question is, I know like their staff has expressed, basically, hey, if you guys can get volunteers, great. If you need us to come in, you could outsource any of that. Same thing with some of the consulting type stuff. If we want to get our own consultants, or if we want to outsource elements to them.
Well, I think where we
Yeah,
are
let me-
right now is.
We're not outsourcing anything to the county anymore, because they've told us.
Okay,
they
so
don't
that's
have-
done.
It's not our decision, they don't have the
Okay,
staff.
and so they have no interest in terms of saying, okay, you guys want to play, we have a lot of good data and everything, why don't, any direction, guidance, nothing, they don't want to play any role in that.
Well,
No,
yeah,
there's two-
if I called Sam up or Delia called Sam up and said, hey, Sam, can you help us out? We've got a great relationship with them. They just said, if you're gonna move forward with real planning and real effort, and real work, we don't have the staff.
And so where I'm getting at is, so you can have that conversation, but it would be informal. They're not interested in us saying, hey, for a couple thousand, can you put
No.
this together?
No.
Which
It's
they-
more just informal. They'll show up to our meetings. We could shoot off
Right.
an email. But
We'll
that's
work
the extent
together
of it.
with them like the
Okay.
agencies do.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Barbara, did you have something else?
No.
Okay, are we finished with this
Yes.
item? Okay, item 5, consideration of parks priorities, future tasks, and direction from the board to the Parks Advisory Committee.
I can speak to this if you like. I put together a one, oh, were you gonna?
No, I was gonna turn it
A
over to you.
one-page, just trying to figure out how we were gonna talk about this at this meeting. I put together, if you see this item 5, one-page thing.
Can I have a quick recommendation? Is there any way we can move this to the last item? So we cover the other two, and then, just because I feel like this is a catch-all for so many different things, and then we could spend essentially the rest of the meeting on this until whatever, and just go through and do the Quarry Park Master Plan and the volleyball project, and then, because I have a feeling some of these, even when we get there, it can relate to consideration of parks' future tasks and priorities.
That might
You
make
okay with
sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Directors? All the directors okay
Sure.
with that? All right, so we will reorder the agenda and move item 5 to after item 7. So item 6, consideration of recommendations to the County of San Mateo regarding the Quarry Park Master Plan. And do we actually have any information
So
other than this sales sheet that's here?
Yeah, I went on the county website, when this item was placed on the agenda, I forgot who requested it, maybe
Multiple
Jim, or-
directors.
okay, multiple people. There was some thought that the plan would be in place at that time, and then Leonard and I, when you talked, you said, well, even if the plan's not in place, let's just make it an item, so first of all, let people know this process is occurring, and to see if your board wanted to have any input on it in the future. So,
Well, I was hoping that we would actually have, like, if they have a draft or a working discussion.
yeah, I couldn't see
Copy or
anything when I
something.
went through the website.
So can anybody here report on what's included? Microphone.
Yeah, sir.
That's so that people watching this on video later can hear you.
I know, I keep forgetting. Anyway, hi, my name's Paul Kelch. I'm from Granada. And I'm on the PAC. Also, from what I know about the preliminary master plan is it's, what I had heard from Sam was that it was gonna be, say, released or presented sometime in the middle of March. So it sounds like it's soon, but that's all I know. So it sounds like maybe this, it'll be coming around soon, but maybe people have heard more about it than I have.
Yeah, anybody who has information on what's included, so in case we might want to supply input back to the county. Barbara?
Well, I was one of the people who requested that we put this on. I went to all the Quarry Park meetings, and it does seem as if one of the things that they are going to include in their master plan is a site for the pump track. And given that from the very beginning of the Parks Committee, I think the one thing that we heard from a lot of really caring and committed community members was, we need a pump track. That this is, if there's one kind of recreation that we could add to this community that would benefit the youth and be a really good thing to have, that would be it. And if it's going to be at Quarry Park, I think we can't vote on this because we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I think it would be good maybe just to have a basic discussion as to our inclination of whether it would be appropriate for us to provide some financial support for that project at Quarry Park if that's in the master plan. I'm not saying we're gonna vote money, but I just thought maybe if we have a discussion of that, because I'm willing to support that, because I would like the people who are the committed supporters of this, the opportunity to be thinking about it and planning ahead.
So I didn't go to all the meetings, I feel like, but with the tone that I felt I definitely heard it from the community in terms of, you know, people that were vocal about the pump track. I didn't so much hear it from the county. I felt like they raised a lot of good objections in terms of, yeah, well, that it may bring in, you know, think about how many additional people it's gonna bring in outside of who's already coming to Quarry Park.
Who raised objections?
Just in terms of like the parking objection, was a good objection was raised.
Who raised the objections? Community members?
Community members with county validating their, you know, basically elaborating that it is a good point that needs to be further. And so where I'm getting at though is I didn't get that I got the you know, heard the community, but from the county, I didn't hear, I kind of more got, we think a pump track's an amazing idea, but we just don't think this is the best spot almost for it. And that's where I think, as part of this, I don't see how we can be planning our plans while they're planning theirs and we're not having any type of synergies in planning, because what if they are planning a pump track and we're saying that one of the medians is best for a pump track? Or alternatively, like with the pump track, I feel like Quarry Park might be the best place, but if it's not gonna be Quarry Park, then we may need to think about reserving some of our other, you know, land that we have for that. And so, so that's kind of I feel like we could talk about that more in the direction of the board, but I feel like that's a huge thing that's missing right now, is how do we, you know, between the two agencies, how do we work a little bit closer on that? And it might be the PAC taking that leadership role.
Well, first, as we heard, the county stepped back from working with us.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, the point that Barbara made, we've heard, and I think the PAC even more, about volunteers for the pump track. So maybe better than money would be if we all offered to coordinate that, organize the volunteers, set up the dates, maybe we buy some materials or whatever and let them go at it.
And I think kind of almost with the last agenda item,
I don't
it's
know,
almost.
by the way, I don't know if the county is
Yeah, I'm just,
favor
yeah, I
of
just
that-
would just
doing it
like
that way.
us to indicate general support for the idea of cooperating if that is part of it, because we see this as a need. And I'd like us to.
But to Matt's point almost, I feel like even with the
Yeah.
last agenda item, they kind of pulled out of the medians and said, hey, listen, this is you guys are gonna be putting in the money, we're kind of pulling back. And almost around that time is when they put their foot on the gas with saying, hey, Quarry Park's gonna become a reality. And so I almost feel like, to your point, they have the resources financially. I feel like where we kind of have the closer connection to the community, they don't realize that we actually have people that have built hundreds of these and have, you know, people have to, you know, find out if it's true, but all the resources, all the labor, everything, I think it's a matter of just paying for any signage and inspection and compliance type fees. But I feel like, to your point, that's where we could work with the PAC committee to be that glue for the volunteers, as opposed to providing financial resources, which I think.
Let's hear from Pat and then Dave.
Again, Patrick Tierney. A couple of reminders is that the PAC last year voted unanimously to have a pump track at Quarry Park. Consider that. We recommended it to the board. And the board, as I understand it, sent a letter to county parks that recommended that you would consider it at a pump track at the quarry. And I think it's worth reading that letter, if we have it, to the group in total here tonight, so that it shows that you've already committed yourself, at least conceptually, to a pump track at the quarry as a board, and that we're not looking elsewhere for a location of pump track, which on a personal basis, and the committee did not find a better location than that. Second, to Barbara's point, financial commitment, you as a board have already said that you've been willing to work on the Perch Beach volleyball, which is helping to fund financially that construction of that facility, even though it's not on district land per se. So I think you already have a precedent that says, as a district, we can help facilitate recreation facility construction and development, even if it isn't on our district land that we own. So in my opinion, I think you've really set the course already that the pump track at the quarry is a reasonable thing to consider, and that we as a district could in fact help finance it. And I don't think we're talking about a lot of money here. We're certainly not talking more money than the Perch Beach volleyball court that was considered. So I think we're already going that direction.
I'll have some comments on that, but let's hear from Dave first.
Dave Olson, I'm Chair of the Mid-Coast Community Council.
Again?
For a rare instance, I'm actually speaking as a member of the MCC, because I am the MCC liaison to county parks for the park general plan. The master plan is not complete. They sort of put it on hold partly because they have a new parks director, Jonathan Jure, and partly because there were enough changes in that third meeting that they're thinking about having a fourth meeting before they complete the master plan. And finally, the parks people have been extremely clear there is no money to implement anything in the master plan in the near future. So I'm not opposed at all to GCSD helping fund things, but I think it's premature to make those decisions given that there is no master plan, that it's even a small possibility that the Parks Department might decide the pump track is not appropriate for one reason or another. So what I'm suggesting is I think it's a great idea to work with county parks, including in Quarry Park or Granada or anywhere else, but I think it's very premature to make any decisions.
So I think combining kind of what both of you said, maybe that's where we fill that void in terms of like talking to people, experts on pump tracks. You know, there people have said if you want a pump track, we could literally do it in a weekend. You know, a couple of versus the most elite pump tracks that cater to all different levels of. And I feel like we might be able to say, hey, give us approval to do a simple pump track. Forget about all the other master plan stuff, and it's something that. If it works, the small basis of it, it could become part of that larger master plan and elite pump track. If it doesn't work and there's all these issues that we didn't plan for, by the time they do their master plan 4 or 5 years from now, they could easily, you know, it would take a couple hours to bulldoze and flatten everything and put up what they want to put up.
So I want to point out that one of the issues doing anything in the county parks is liability. And a pump track is seen as having potentially high liability, and the county carries its own insurance. So the county has been very reluctant to do things that open them up to liability. So it's good for you to talk to them, keep talking to them, but hold on.
But and to that point, I think you talking like back the one Tony Hawk's brother was talking big on that the issue has been so litigated now that there's actually such good case law that as long as there's not gross negligence in this skate parks are much more even dangerous and more injuries and stuff that there is protections that protects the agencies where that's not even years ago that was a bigger concern, but that's been worked out through the courts that's you know there's I think it could be handled the same way as a skate park would.
Barbara.
I don't think anyone was talking about voting money or, you know, we all understand that it's a process. I think it was just a discussion, particularly in the context of the often expressed need and what the committee is going to be looking at, that to have the board members just speak to potential level of support. So we weren't looking for a vote, we weren't looking for allocation of funds, it was just a discussion of how to solve this problem that we keep having, which is that there is such broad community support for this, and it's really hard to see how to make it happen.
So take what everyone
David,
said.
you need to be
No, no,
recognized, no, you don't keep jumping in, you need to be recognized by the chair. You're the
Okay.
only one that just jumps in whenever he feels like it.
Okay.
That has to stop,
Okay.
all right?
Now, Leonard, do you wanna roll this discussion? Because there, you know, like I said, when I first put this on, I thought there might be a Quarry Park master plan, and there's not, obviously. Do you wanna roll this discussion into, tasks, if you will? We want the PAC to look at that, maybe they'll have a committee, or, you know, they'll leave that up to you guys, to contact the county, Sam Hertzberg, who's ever leading the thrust for Quarry Park, and start the partnership.
I think we really need to get whatever working document the county has, the discussion draft or something, and probably both the PAC and the board should look at it, maybe in a joint meeting, I don't know, but I'm always concerned about the county going in. The county does grandiose things that are always too intense for the location. Do I have to say Moss Beach Park? No, I didn't need to say Moss Beach Park. Where, the kids love it, but it's kind of ridiculous where they literally threw everything in to this one little tiny parcel.
Right.
And that intensity of development is not appropriate, especially out in the rural area. And Quarry Park is on the rural side of the urban-rural boundary. But as far as the money is concerned, well, let's finish up that. So if we can somehow get any kind of discussion draft that is sort of current, and do you think that the PAC and the board should have separate meetings or a joint meeting on that specific topic?
I think it'd be easier with smaller group.
Okay.
So the PAC could have a subcommittee that might liaison with the county.
Yeah, I'm just,
Right.
I'm just suggesting that we open a dialogue, like Pat's talking about, and
Yeah.
have a subcommittee, just call Sam and say, hey, we're interested, we're here with you, what are your plans? Because the stuff on their web, they posted on February 14th that they put on the website the notes from the October meeting. I mean, that's the pace we're at here, so I think it's better to have a dialogue, and then you're at the
What
table.
was the question you were asking, Leonard, when you first asked that?
Now, I have a question that
I
maybe.
was gonna roll this
Um,
discussion into the direction from the board to the PAC.
Yeah, we can do that, but I have a question for Dave regarding money. And I hope Dave knows more than I do about this. What is the situation with the mitigation fee money that the county's been collecting for 10 or 15 years? Which they no longer have the authority to collect within our district, and we really got to get our council working on that, Chuck.
I don't know anything about authority to collect within this district.
But
It's a,
what happened
so
to
I'm
the
not
money?
gonna speak to that part. That's a legal decision.
What happened to the fund balance?
The funds themselves are, we have a report on the MCC website. There's 1 year missing, but it's currently a balance of about $250,000. It's been spent on Moss Beach Park. It was spent on the Bridgepoint Park in Clipper Ridge. There have been some other proposals. MCC, myself and Lisa have been talking with Parks Department about, and County Council about whether some of that could be reserved for something like a community center. So we're trying to get the MCC involved in the spending, but at least we've been getting reports.
So there's 250,000 of unspent money the county has available from,
And it actually shows up in the budget that was just approved at Tuesday's
Okay.
meeting as a line item in the parks funds, by the way.
so they have 250,000, but they don't have money for Quarry Park. What part of this am I missing?
It's limited to capital improvements, and there's a couple other limitations. So the Quarry Park improvements are, well, even a significant fraction of what was done there, what proposed is done, you're probably well into $1 million.
Now, my concern in terms of this district, funding it is giving the county the money without us having any control whatsoever over what's done there and how the money is spent. And volleyball is a totally different thing. It's a narrow focused project, but and a well-defined narrow focus project, but, as should be clear by now, I just don't trust the county.
I don't see why we can't, if we decide to provide some funds or anything else, why we can't say to the county, by the way, this is only for the pump track.
Yeah, we could, and we would still potentially
it-
have to have
No, we'd have
input
an
over
agreement.
Yeah, and
where.
it has to be developed in a way that's responsive to concerns of the neighbors and, you know, all those issues.
Well,
have to
but I
be-
think we kind of
but-
got to, from everyone, you know, the idea that was crystallizing in my head as everyone was kind of talking was that, okay, yeah, they have their master plan that they want full control over, and whether a pump track's in there or not is up to them. But we might be able to serve that intermediary role and say, we're gonna build a beta pump track. We're gonna, you give us approval, we're gonna do something not crazy fancy, we're just gonna build something that we have the, you know, resources, this is how it's gonna look. And like I said, they can almost use that as market research for their master quarry plan that, to Dave Olson's point might not take, they already said isn't gonna happen for 5 years or whatever. So this could serve as something simple, there's nothing structural or about it or whatever. Literally, it could be bulldozed in a couple hours, in a couple years from now, once they develop their master plan. But we serve as the intermediary to say, hey, let us handle the beta version of the pump track. And, you know, nothing else outside of, you know, still giving them that full control, and, you know, whatever you guys wanna do, that's up to you guys.
That's,
long-term,
and I think that's the
financially,
dialogue we
whatever.
want the PAC to start with them, to see
Yeah.
if they're even, you know, open to this.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you were asking, Larry, about the master plan, I think we can talk about it in another agenda, but I do see that as essential, was the PAC, you know, I know last meeting you said too, yeah, they can study anything, whether we own the land or not, they could make recommendations, and I feel like whether they want to provide input, you know, the county input, I feel like the PAC needs to do that, regardless of how responsive they are to us.
I have to say, I'm really bad on names. The woman sitting next to Gail had her hand up before Pat.
Nancy.
Oh, Nancy, okay.
Who we can put on the track.
PAC member Nancy Moore.
Did you want to speak, or?
No, I asked Dave my questions, thank you.
Oh, okay. Patrick?
Just a couple of quick comments to your concern, Leonard. You know, you would just put, if any funds were ever to be committed, you would have a memorandum of understanding in writing that outlines what happens. That's done very, very commonly. And it can also be put in the form of a grant, which parks all over the peninsula, all over the state, receive grant money all the time, and they have limitations on how it can be spent, timelines and so forth. So I think it's important to consider us kickstarting it financially, because otherwise it's pretty clear it isn't going to happen. And it doesn't have to be a large amount of money, I don't think.
And, yeah, and I think that one important distinction, I think, you know, I feel like, you know, we obviously haven't been in the Parks and Rec business for too long, but I feel like our standards are kind of different than their standards. If they're gonna do a project, it's gonna be, you know, kind of full scale versus, that's great long-term, but short-term, you know, we don't really even need that. Let's just do something that could, you know, that could serve until we get there, you know, giving them that full authority to, hey, if this works, you guys could do it.
I think we're looking at the opposite way.
Yeah.
I think the way this would really work is we'd get a use agreement, almost like with the media.
Exactly.
We'd get a use agreement at Quarry Park, forget about just giving them money, we would do the project, and they would allow us to do the project
Yeah.
on Quarry Park.
And even make that use for short-term, like a
Right.
2.5-year use permit.
Right.
Chuck,
So they know that.
could you have Delia find out what the increment on our insurance costs would be to cover a pump track like that?
Okay.
Because I'm gonna guess that it's a small increment on our existing insurance.
I'm gonna guess it's a complicated issue because it's county property, not ours.
Right. I'm sure it's not insurmountable. Paul?
Paul Kelch. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of add to the, as far as supporting a pump track, back in some of these Quarry Park planning meetings, Sam had expressed to, you know, pump track supporters, Sam from the county parks, yeah, Hersberg, about having, you know, working with volunteers from the community and also, you know, like a local club group or, you know, interest group. And, and that could be, with volunteer, but also volunteer funds, it could be fundraised. And they seem, he expressed interest in that happening. So it wasn't, it didn't seem like they were, like that would be ideal for them, is to have community resources put into it as opposed to it just being their project. And I know from what I understand, if it was, it would, there'd be a lot of, it would take a lot longer if it was just up to them to completely build it. And then also, you'd have, however the bidding process would go and whoever would end up getting the job to build it, because the county wouldn't build it. Whereas if there is local, local people that are capable of doing this, on a volunteer basis and, with funds raised, and maybe somehow that could tie in with the GCSD as far as the support, and maybe, like that, if there's any funds to be contributed from the GCSD, it could be specifically, okay, we paid for this, material, and then the labor was donated type of thing.
That's in fact a vision I had years ago when we were only thinking about the boulevard medians here, that the district could go out and acquire tools that could be borrowed from the district, and we could pay for materials and then authorize people to do specific work.
Yeah, and then that sounds great. Like the money would go directly to the actual, construction costs, but not hiring people to do it.
And I actually think that if things like that are done with community labor, and we fund we cover all the out-of-pocket costs, that the community is more emotionally invested in it.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I think that's the way to get what the community wants.
Yeah. So maybe and this is kind of blurring back into agenda item 5, but maybe the subcommittee of the PAC could approach the county on how can we work together, as we've just discussed here, to maybe get that done on a trial basis at least, since we keep hearing that it's easy to take it out if necessary.
Yeah, and like I said, that's why I think it segues into 5. I agree with
All right, so anything else on item 6? I really would like to try and see something from the county on what their master plan is. And of course, if they try and do everything at once, that's just not going to go anywhere. The master plan should be a concept, not a hard plan, and modify it as you go. So item 7, is there anybody? I was sort of expecting somebody was going to ask Neil.
Yeah, Jim asked me to put this on, I checked with him.
Yes, I have an update. I have Neil Merrill's made a presentation to us last year, and we approved $5,000 for the volleyball. But right now he's approached the Coastal Commission, and they need to have a coastal development permit. So they're applying for this through the Harbor District, and are hoping to have something submitted in the spring.
So the Harbor District is going to be the actual applicant of record?
Yes.
Do you know, because I know there was some discussion about what they were going to do, like they'd said, do we do 1 or maybe 2? Do we put up additional benches for people to watch?
That's all I know.
Okay, so that'd be,
Whatever the $5,000 would cover.
can you fit more than 1 down there, or is it just,
Yeah, I think they have plans for 2.
they do have 2
Okay,
and some benches and
okay.
stuff? Okay.
So they're looking at applying this spring, Jim?
Yes, this spring.
So do you actually have that somehow marked in the budget?
Our $5,000?
Yeah, is there a line item that says we've
We
committed?
had a miscellaneous line item in the budget of something like $10,000 that it would be.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that should be called out explicitly, so it doesn't get lost, since it may not actually be requested until the next fiscal year.
Okay.
Need to make sure we carry that forward as a line item.
Okay.
So, so my only comment on this, and I think we'll talk more in the next topic, but just since this is the first example, You know, I feel like this is something, like, you look at the people pushing this, you know, the one daughter is gonna go to, you know, eventually get a scholarship to college or whatever, and as people, you know, as far as the volunteers, I feel like, you know, it's important that we kind of establish that, because knowing that people move on over time, and that's where 7, 8 years from now, it's just the, you know, torn down, you know, nets, people aren't updating the nets or whatever else there, and that's where, you know, how do we put that next level of, you know, the volunteer infrastructure in place to say, hey, you know, we're gonna provide leadership in terms of this is what you volunteers need to do, and if you're not doing it, we're gonna, you know, eventually A, replace you, and B, pay professionals to come in maintenance or whatever else we gotta do, you know?
I think the first
and
step
so-
is we should hear from Neil on what his plan is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I'm
then,
just
you know,
talking broader.
we can
This
potentially get
falls
the-
into, to me, every other meeting that we talk
Well,
about.
we can potentially get the plan modified when we hear from him as to what his plan is regarding what you
And
just
we
said.
could probably, to your point, David, maybe enter into some kind of funding agreement if the board wants with the harbor district. That'd be the easiest, because it's on their land, and we'd be funding the equipment, if you will.
Yeah.
So just kind of, some kind of thing that says.
Could be a model of
Upon
agreement.
request by the harbor district, you know, which would be via the volleyball
Yeah.
people, we'll fund that.
I remember, you know, also Muscle Milk does high quality nets that they'll send out. They're part of their program. They're free, and they'll, every time they need to be updated, things like that. We're as far as a
Right.
good source, we don't have to worry about that.
And I think it's, before we segue into item 5, I always feel strange doing this, but I do it anyway, okay? We do indeed collect property tax from the people. A major part of our application to LAFCO when it became a Parks and Recreation District was we were going to use this property tax for Parks and Recreation. And if you go to the state legislative analyst, they don't want property tax to be used for fee-driven things like sewers.
That's actually been a policy since Prop 13 in
Yes.
1969,
So-
68.
So we do have funding.
70.
So again, I appreciate volunteers, I appreciate everyone trying to save money, but we're collecting the money for the people is a big part of our LAFCO application, so we do have funding, so.
No, absolutely.
Everyone keep that in mind.
And I'm all for the having the funding there. I'm even for, you know, I think soon we should be having a separate budgets and all that, you know.
We do
that-
have
We
separate
actually do,
budgets.
yeah.
Well, in more
But a
detail,
real
in terms
one,
of,
right.
yeah, in terms of really breaking that down with the longer term projections. But you do think about it, the almost easy part is building all these medians and doing, the harder part is then, oh, do we need to hire a full-time maintenance person? You know, at what point? And so before we get there, I see a long-term trend where we can have volunteers do most of the work with us covering for them. So instead of a full-time maintenance person, we outsource it to a third party who comes once a week or once a month and
And
kind of does
I've
the
talked
extra.
to this end, I've also spoken over the past 2 or 3 years with Half Moon Bay staff, because I would
Yeah.
think eventually at some point in time, we want to be working as kind of a coast-side thing. We're our own independent district, obviously, but, you know, we could share resources.
Until Half Moon Bay decides to dissolve their apartment again.
Right. Well,
Um, Yeah. So can we go to item 5 now?
Yes, please.
All right, consideration of parks priorities, future tasks, and direction from the board to the Parks Advisory Committee. How do we want to approach this item?
So, again, we put this item on the agenda, so we didn't get into the weeds on every project here. Your board has formed the PAC committee to do some of the legwork, help advise you, solicit community input. So broadly, I think what you want to do here is have your board provide some direction to the PAC. You know, we've already started this with the pump track thing we just talked about and whatnot, and coordinating with the county staff. So that's kind of what we're looking for, more broad-based initiatives. The medians is an obvious one now that we've got the agreement in place, moving forward. So,
So I was just gonna say, since we have a time limit. that's running-
David,
okay.
you don't just jump in.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was trying to think about how we tackle this, and it seemed as if that maybe one way we could approach it is to talk about the 12 items that were recommended by the Parks Committee as priorities for the district and then approved with minor modifications by the board last year. And then I met with Pat Tierney, who was the chair of the Parks Committee, and we together came up with 5 additional items that we thought were appropriate to be discussed to add to the list for consideration by the new Parks Committee. So maybe the Parks Committee, and there's a handout that says item 5 at the top, and I wonder if it'd be worthwhile just reading for the public what the 12 items were that were selected in the past as the priorities for GCSD?
Yeah, since not everybody has the piece of paper, that might be a good idea.
So the
And
priorities-
Let me point out that item 12, the county nixed.
Right.
Only in the medians.
Right, and so I'll come back to that. Just have to make a note here.
Do you want me to do it?
Um,
All right, so these are the approved priorities for GCSD for parks, based on a recommendation from the Parks Committee that went to the board. So number one was having a landscape architect develop a trail plan for the district with first implementation on Median 11 and Portola. Number two, complete an inventory of district lands and other lands within the district with recreational potential. Three, develop plans for a small neighborhood active park in median number 8, Balboa Circle. 4, install more benches and picnic tables at key locations in communities, communities and medians. I don't know why it says communities, I think community. 5, protect the Burnham Strip and acquire properties in it that become available. 6, develop, implement a tree management plan starting with medians 8 and 11. 7, and this goes to the pump track issue, plan and develop a bike pump track, potentially at Quarry Park with SMC Parks. 8, paint utility boxes in medians and in the community. 9, create a skate park. 10, hold a community event and information session about plans for median number 8. 11, Clipper Ridge Park basketball court improvement. And 12, disc golf. And then, if I can throw out the things that Pat and I came up with for adding this, is one of them, we feel that it's really important to implement some kind of a newsletter or outreach way. We need to tell people right now about what's happening. People are going to see surveyors out there on the Burnham Strip, and they're going to wonder what that's about. The Burnham Strip planning, number 2 was planning for the Burnham Strip Park. That's probably one of the first tasks that the Parks Committee is going to be asked to deal with is when we get the conceptual plans for the Burnham Strip Park to start taking some community input on that. And we really need to share that with the community. We need to figure out a way to communicate with the people here. Holding a general community event just about parks, not necessarily focused on one plan or another. Back to the contracting for the master plan for the medians, which was essentially number 1 priority, but it's something that we need to think about getting going again. And planning and implementing an education program of summer classes, which Pat has some really excellent ideas about. And then I would add status of Clipper Ridge Park, which we talked about earlier tonight, and perhaps options for the Foothills parcel, which is another thing we talked about tonight. And at the bottom of this page, we may or may not want to talk about it. Those were the land acquisition priorities. And it seems to me that maybe talking about the parks priorities is enough to talk about between now and 10 o'clock. So, and we put off the acquisition priorities to another meeting, maybe.
I was just gonna say, before we burn up too much time, since there will be some back and forth too, does anyone from the audience want to speak now to make sure you get in and
Are you
say-
chairing the meeting or am I?
I was recommending as an idea, you could obviously overrule me, I'm saying that soon we're gonna be worrying about leaving, and if people want to say something,
Well, then you suggest it to the board.
I'm suggesting it.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're going to end up doing multiple rounds here, but
Was this handout available at all for people, the list of previously?
wonder if we could get a bunch of
I can
copies
make it.
made real
Yeah,
quick.
let's make some copies and hand them out, because it's the official list that was done by the last committee, and it seems like that's a
It looks like
focus
we need
for-
like around a little over a dozen copies. So, do members in the audience have any comments on items on the list or items that might be added to the list?
It's a few things for your committee to do.
One of the things that I would suggest adding is bike racks. And, somebody said, where? And I said, I don't know. We need to ask some bicycle enthusiasts. There's one right there. Where we should put them, and it occurs to me that.
But that's what a master plan for the
Quarry Park.
medians would do too. Master plan for the medians would show
Right.
what our trails were gonna look like, where the
anywhere
bike
in the
racks should go,
community.
where the picnic tables should go, where we should have all, you know.
Nancy. And then I don't know the name of the person right in front of the camera. Suzanne, okay.
I'm Nancy Marsh, newly appointed to the advisory committee. I just want to say the one thing that I don't see on here that I think could take a year to do, but would be, I think, important to do is, so that we don't start off with a blank sheet each time, is to do kind of both a multi-year, like 1 year detailed, 3-year estimates, 10-year kind of master plan, and put some numbers to it so that we have a budget that goes with it for 1 year and some at least estimate projections on how we're going to spend that money. So it's kind of, for me, think about making plans for all of these things without knowing how much of that pot we have to dig into or how fast we're going to use it up. I'd like to put money with it and then be able to pace out the timing of the plans to go with the funds and how the funds are calculated.
Yeah, I'd love to see us proceed with the consultant for the medians, the master plan, because that would give us numbers.
Yeah, so one of the items that Barbara was suggesting adding is contracting for master plan for medians, and so if we just make that into the multi-year thing that you're suggesting, does that cover it?
If we had a master plan that had all of the things that ultimately we decide to do and then kind of what time and priority, so we had a full plan. So that at the beginning of each year, instead of starting fresh each year, you know what's on your plan for this year and you have some estimate of what it's going to cost. Rather than 12 individual plans, I guess I'm saying is make sure that there's an overall plan that incorporates all those things.
Makes sense? Suzanne, microphone. Want the people watching this on TV to be able to hear you later.
She's not Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Elliott. I mostly just had a question on where number 11 at Portola is for the median.
They're the pink dots there.
It's the first block up from the post office.
Oh, the one that runs along.
Right.
Okay. Okay. And I think that was all. One other question, yes. So I have concern about the medians because I live in those areas. I live across from one, and I'm just curious, so where would I find out the discussions, further discussions on this subject? Will I be emailed?
At the committee.
Okay, so, but I got an email about this meeting, and before I had not, so I was just curious if I'm on that email list, it'll continue to.
Well, I'm not on the email list.
Who did you
so
get
we
an
need
email
to do
from?
something about
I don't know
this.
who it was from, I just
Probably Delia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
okay.
Yes,
So
well,
I'm
what-
just
one
assuming
of-
that I'm on the list.
Right. One of our priorities was to figure out a way to communicate with this community. Is there a way do they mail bills? No. So there's no,
You're on the property tax bill.
yeah.
But, you know, I'll say this, and it's not an exact overlap, but Recology does indeed put out bills.
Well, that's,
and-
yeah, but that's useless because a lot of people like me are on paperless billing, and so and I've gone over this with Chris Porter and no satisfaction yet, but I told her she needs to come up with some alternate way to get to those of us who don't get the paper bills.
And the paperless bill is truly just billing? There's nothing, if they put a blurb in their regular bill, would it go on the paperless as well?
I don't, I'll have to see if they even have the images of the bills.
Yeah, I'll ask.
I don't remember.
I at least got the recycling thing at the end of the year, so they are doing some separate things.
Yeah, and they're always interested in community outreach for this kind of stuff. They donated $5,000 for, I forget what, 4 or 5 meetings ago.
Yeah.
I forget what.
We just took the money.
It was for the arts-
Any money, I take it, figure out later.
It was for the RCD work on the median.
Thank you.
On the Burnham strip.
Patrick.
But to your point, yeah. we
They're
don't mail out
non-native
bills,
removal
Barbara,
and
so certainly.
Other stuff on the,
We have on and off, mostly off, done newsletters.
Well, absolutely, we do newsletter, yeah.
I just thought Susanna, right? Her comment is illustrative of what the PAC has seen for the last year. The community reacts to some proposal that they hear about offhand, and they come at us flying. And so we have to do, as a district, a much better job of proactively communicating with the community
Yes.
to let them know what we're doing. And that's why Barbara and I have talked about a newsletter. Now, how you get it to people is always a challenge, but everything from next door, hanging in the post office, you name it, we use every single means that the district can have to get this information out, because everybody's reactive rather than proactive in the community. They don't know what the district's doing, and they assume the worst when they hear something.
What's your feeling on whether it's worth the money to print the ledger size double, ledger folded double newsletter and mail it
My
out?
initial feeling for the first newsletter that the district has, it's well worth your money and your postage and the printing costs to have it go to every member of the district that you have a mailing address. I mean, you've got to introduce yourself. What business would not do that? So I think it's worthwhile. The second part of that is, while you're doing that, let's have a catalog, a very limited number of program offerings that are available to the community this summer. So we obviously have staff limitations in the district, and so we can't overwhelm them with lots of things. But if we had 8 programs this summer, and that each PAC member was in charge of developing one of the programs, and again, it would be the program that I'm conceptualizing here is what Half Moon Day does, what City of Pacifica does. What is done normally is that a nonprofit in the community, a for-profit business in the community, they operate the program. All we do as a district is quality control it, define what it is clearly, usually have dates associated with it, a cost, and then we send the word out and we receive payment. And so, for instance, the Harbor District, not the Harbor District, but the Yacht Club offers kids sailing classes. That would be an ideal local organization that provides it. We help them get the word out. And again, 12 kids maximum in the class. That's only 12 parents who could either send it in online registration or in person. That's not going to overwhelm our staff. For the last 6 or so years, I've run a nonprofit in San Francisco that offers sailing and kayaking classes for kids. And the reason why I say this, we take about 700 a year, is that we have a website, online registration website, that almost everything we do is online. It involves no staff time for the registration process. So payments are received online, the information is given out online, and we have very little need for staff interaction. So that I can set that up. It's free, it's no cost to the district. So, I mean, there's all these pieces that are in place. We have a great need in the community for knowing what the district is doing. We have an opportunity to provide, say for instance, kid camp, or art classes for adults, or work with Petit Baleine and offer infant swimming classes. I mean, these are basic, super basic programs that, as any community recreation program, and believe it or not, you are, to a big extent, a community recreation program in the district. This is done, this is the norm. So maybe my proposal is that, let's get started. If we don't do it this summer, it's another full year before kids are out of school and we can do camp. So it started on a small scale, involve the PAC, get them involved with something they're excited about doing. Fran might be interested in Quarry Park history, or, I don't know, something like that could really provide a service to the community, and we can get started on the process.
I'd be a little concerned that that's too ambitious for the first year when there's only, say, 4 months until you want to get things going. I like the idea, but when you say 8, I'm just, I don't know.
No, that's eight classes, not more than 8 classes. That's not a lot. That's 8 dates.
Well, I think, yes, the committee, should talk about this, reprioritize the list and see if this is something the committee wants to take on. And I think this would be a great second newsletter. Our first newsletter could be reappointment of the Parks Committee, who are the people on it. We can talk about what's happening with Burnham Strip, such exciting, we're gonna get the conceptual plans hopefully in the next month or two to get the process started for the Burnham Strip. And then people will wonder, we're gonna have people out there in the next, I think, probably few weeks doing non-native removal. So we have a newsletter half full of
When you say
stuff already.
newsletter, you mean mailing it out to every
I don't
resident's
know.
address? Because what's the cost of that roughly for Chuck,
It's-
one newsletter?
I think last time.
It's over $1 a piece, I think.
Yeah, it was something near $3,000.
So clearly that could add up quick, where I think to your point in terms of treating it like a business, the whole point of the newsletter would just be to drive people to take action, saying, so by the time we send out the newsletter, we should have the new website up, saying, visit PAC for more information. And I was gonna say the other thing, I think there's some email lists going around that are just 2. Everyone's email address is in there, and in terms of different people interested in parks, I think maybe turn into Google Groups. So then one email address goes out. If you want to add yourself to it, you could be publicly added and approved. If you don't want to receive the emails anymore, you could take yourself off of it. I think it's a good process so that to her point, bringing it up about getting informed, that email address, if you want to subscribe to it, easier than using MailChimp and some of these other things. It's a really free, easy way to
Okay, and I don't, I'm
coordinate
not
that
sure,
side of it.
were you in favor of mailing out the newsletter?
Maybe one time,
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
once we get fully organized, or maybe once a year, but in terms of, so I think this first time would be when we do it, we're gonna mail it out, introducing the summer programs. Here's a little list of these. Make sure to stay tuned to our website, and if you would like to join our Google groups, in addition to here's some upcoming meeting dates and times or whatever. But really the goal being that everyone that gets that, we get them to take action by joining the group, the Facebook page, or at least knowing there's a website.
And I don't wanna jump into policy, because that's your board's thing, obviously, but I think 100% we need to send out a newsletter, if nothing else, to point people to the online resources we'll have set up and whatnot. $3,000, I'll make a joke about it, we spent $3,000 on a sewer newsletter, okay? So, I think we can spend $3,000.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the
parks.
feedback was,
But I think if we're not, if everything else isn't done up to that newsletter point,
No, I
it's
agree,
almost
so we
like,
have to have
And
it all teed
who's
up.
gonna make
Absolutely.
this, who's gonna make this happen?
Well, we're gonna have to hire an outside firm to.
a marketing,
get this
like the place in
yeah.
Montero will put it together. Well, we just gotta provide them some of
Yeah,
the
so.
basic info.
Well-
Again,
So-
the
Right.
PAC,
I think we wanna
who's
ask
your
the
volunteers?
PAC.
You've
Yeah.
got the PAC who's been waiting 4 months to have something to do.
Yeah.
yeah, let me ask.
Oh, you were talking about who?
Well, they can
I was
put
talking
together
about
a
nuts
draft and
bolts.
like.
Yeah, I
I'm
was
stuff
talking
word,
nuts and
then
bolts,
a
too.
professional would take it to the next level.
Well, I know how these things work,
Yeah,
but
the
it's just,
website is critical, but it doesn't have to be fancy.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
recreation
Well,
part of the website does not have
It
to
would be 1 or more pages on the district's website, not a separate website.
Right, yes, of course.
Yeah.
These companies that go out and create a dozen different websites are just showing that they're clueless.
you could have a nice
Be a
button,
link on your webpage.
yeah.
So, Chuck, can you make an 8.5 by 11 legible version of this
No?
and have it in the newsletter?
Actually, of that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because that should be in the newsletter with a thing saying, keep this if you're at all interested in what's going on.
So, and then to the second point about the summer programs, I feel like when I first heard it, the thing that really caught
What program?
the summer programs, launching them this summer, and not thinking we're ready for it, I would have probably had that same response, but when I first heard about it, Pat had mentioned this would be something great that we could launch and try to make it so Delia is not involved at all in terms of, and what that meant to me is like, hey, we don't need these expectations of trying to match Half Moon Bay's summer full catalog. This is just something that, really small scale, a couple people that are already in the community, we have all these different people, would just say, hey, this is what I normally charge for you guys for a couple hours with these age ranges. This is what I'm gonna charge per person. he has all the infrastructure to handle all the online registration. That person's already insured and everything in terms of how they normally do their business, you know? And so really, I think all we would have to worry about is kind of that first newsletter that goes out approving which programs we want to do, whether it's nature walks or
And I think,
whatever else.
what your maybe board needs to focus on now, your board and the PAC, is, you know, you've got this list of 12 items and another 5 items and whatnot. It's almost like putting together this 10-year master plan. Well,
Yeah.
there always has to be a year one, and in this case, it's a 1-year plan, and there's gotta be a month 1 and 2 and 3. Focus on what we want out. Do we wanna get that newsletter out? Is that the first thing? If so, make sure we've got all the supporting pieces as they're drafting the newsletter. Make sure that if we point them to our website, there is indeed a tab for the website with all this kind of stuff. I think we have to prioritize that stuff and task Pat. Like Pat Tierney said, there's a lot of pent up, I think, you guys are ready to go, is the sense I get, and, you know, turn you loose and let these guys go.
So
So Matthew had his hand up.
for anybody that doesn't know, we don't mention it very often, the district's website is granada.ca.gov. Matthew?
I would like to ask Pat, I think it's a great idea if you can get the PAC members to each come up with a proposal for a class and start working on it.
Come up
And aren't
with
you
or
all
adopt.
glad you applied?
Now the regrets come in.
But, how long, then, those have to be reviewed, this board will have to look at them, we'll have to have written descriptions, et cetera. How long will that take? Because it's only the beginning of March, but time flies, and if we want to get this newsletter out in, say, May, can that happen?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I have colleagues that work in Pacifica and Half Moon Bay. The forms are already there. We just changed names in terms of the blank contract with the organization, so that's all laid out. Liabilities established, insurance requirements are established. All those things are already established with most businesses, and they're laid out in the contract with the organization. So we're not inventing anything. This is all kind of standard stuff. And so, you know, could it be done? You know, honestly, it's just one, each PAC member has one organization, one program that they have to develop. I don't see that as being real complicated. You know, I could go down to the harbor, to the yacht club tomorrow and have it, you know, probably identified. So you as a board would want to look at these contracts, at least initially, but in the future, the board in Half Moon Bay or in Pacifica doesn't do that. It's the director of recreation. You don't have one of those people now. Maybe that could be Delia in the future doing that. But maybe the first time you would look at those contracts just to make sure you're comfortable with where it's going and that it has safety and reliability built into it and cost accountability and those sorts of things. But honestly, it's not that complicated.
I'm still unclear on what the district's involvement is in the type of setup that you're outlining.
Sure. It's the same thing that Pacifica does. It's the same thing that Half Moon Bay does, which is they have community centers, they have swimming pools. So for Pacifica, they have specific facilities that their staff, and they have staff, so they can run some of those. They can offer some of those. We don't have any of those. We're sort of like Half Moon Bay. Half Moon Bay has a community center, but the swimming pool doesn't have, so they work with Petit Baleen to make that infant swim lessons available. Because if
But does the city do anything beyond publicizing it and pointing people at it?
quality control and defining what is wanted. So those are primarily what they do and help publicize it. And again, it's getting the word out to the community, and you're associated with, in this case, local businesses, local nonprofits.
Like, so my son signed up, he's 3 years old, Jaime Crosco does a soccer every Saturday, different age groups. And so it's in the catalog where I saw it through Half Moon Bay catalog. You know, you pay your fee of like $95. I think, you know, I don't know how much goes to him, but a certain amount goes to him, a certain amount goes to the city for handling the registration. You could send in a check, or you could do it online. I think he's recommending do it all online, so we don't have to do anything you know, hey, if it's a little bit harder for people, oh, well, we don't have the resources right now to compete with the large Parks and Recs. But yeah, it's as simple as that in terms of that person, whoever those vendors are, they want that day, all the kids show up at their location, they're handling everything. None of our staff is there, or, you know, whatever, it's all contracted out to these parties. We're just facilitating that organization process, because just like Jaime Carrasco, he loves working with kids, soccer kids, but if Half Moon Bay didn't have that program in the catalog, I would have never known about it. But because they have that catalog of programs, we went through and looked through the different ones that he was old enough for.
Yeah.
And so that's where I feel like he's one that if we want to do it, he'd do something at Corey Park in a second, in terms of, you know, it's just teaching kids how to teamwork and, you know, just getting them to exercise a little bit. So I think.
And the pricing is such that it's at the community, it's at the regular rate of the provider. And the community gets a small fee from that.
And these are things
they sacrifice 5% of what they would normally charge, and that fee goes to the community to help support their marketing and recreation department.
Do these providers bring their own insurance, or?
Yes, that's a requirement. They have to show a certificate of insurance for, typically it's $1 million.
So, let me ask this. Half Moon Bay mails out a pretty hefty thing, I guess, once a year.
Right.
What are the pros and cons of us working with them to piggyback onto their mailing, since they mail it to at least a good chunk of El Granada, maybe all of El Granada? I have no idea how
Their
far it
summer
reaches.
program is already out. The summer guide is already out. So we
So
couldn't
think-
do it for this summer, but
So maybe
I
you
think-
can think about that for future years then, whether
I think
that's
you
good
have
or
to
bad.
establish yourself as your own
Right.
entity, your own district, your own standalone. We're coast-side, but we're not all coast-side in one sense. So that's my opinion, is that you have to be accountable for the taxpayer money that you're collecting, and one way to do that is to show that you're offering programs, that you're providing those things, rather than send them to Half Moon Bay, here's their website.
Okay.
So Pat, just to pick one thing, because we'll be somewhat implementing this, and let's pick your sailing lessons or something that we
Right,
were
okay.
talking about. Sailing lessons, so we'd set something up, we'd send out a newsletter, it says, hey, go on our website, you can see 5 programs, one of which is sailing, it's up there, they could sign up online,
Right.
have this thing, and one of you all would set it up with the yacht club.
In advance.
Right, and we'd get 12 people who signed up, we'd set it up, and that's how it would work.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, it's all set up contractually in advance before it ever goes live on the website,
Right.
or in a guide.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Nancy,
And can
Well,
I-
Nancy can talk first, yeah.
Nancy,
So
Oh.
actually,
You have to go up.
Just to clarify in my head, is the main purpose of doing that so that the district is providing recreational activities to the community? Because we've talked more about recreational spaces, like the medians and Burnham Strip, but this is a way for the district to be providing and supporting recreational activities via the district. Okay,
And
then it builds
most
our
of the-
brand as a district that provides something of value.
Right, and mostly the youth in the district.
Okay, thanks.
Barbara.
I think this sounds like a great idea, and if you can make it work, I mean, I think we're gonna ask the committee to sort of look at these priorities, and that could be the number one priority that comes out of it. I think we're all generally supportive if it can be worked. I do wanna make sure that we keep working on some of the park projects, and of course, Burnham, you know, what's really, Burnham Strip is here, where is it? I forget which number it is.
Number 5.
No, actually, the Burnham Strip Park is down in additional items, because as those who've been paying attention know, we have a landscape architect who's going to come in with 3 conceptual plans for the Burnham Strip, and we're going to be sending those. It's going to come to the board first, but then the idea is we'll send them down to the Parks Committee to take public input. And the notion is not to have people choose among the 3. The purpose of these 3 plans is to really give people some ideas of what the options are there. And then we're going to want to hear from the public. So that's another big task that I hope will really move forward so we can get that project going. I mean, we have a lot on our plate. I'm actually really positive about this idea. I do see that it could take time, so it's a question of priorities. And I guess I'm comfortable sending it back to you as a committee to see how you all feel about it. It sounds as if we're fortunate because Pat has a lot of the mechanics and the nuts and bolts of how to make this work done, so that makes it a lot easier. So this may be doable with less effort. I think getting the newsletter idea, something where we can communicate with people, is really important. I mean, maybe we need to just go, each of us, and talk about what our highest priorities are. But I'd like to see the Burnham's, the committee work on the Burnham Strip park input process. I'd like to see us move forward with a master plan for the medians. I'd like the summer program because it does provide a direct benefit, and if we can work it out without a huge amount of staff time. And then I think above all of these, are sort of kind of pulling them all together, is the notion of some kind of better website, better communication strategy for reaching out to the people of El Granada.
I guess I'm still trying to understand what's the benefit to the community of the district being the focal point for programs that are privately run? I mean, why can't people just go directly to those companies? I'm assuming there's a reason, it's just not apparent to me what it is.
Again, they could, but this is sort of intermediate step. At some point in time, the district will have more facilities. They will have a community center. They will have where we can hold the classes, where we can do more. But, we've got to get started somewhere.
And just a constituency, there's some people that don't drive, so in order to take their kid to play soccer in Half Bay from Moss Beach, they would have to take a bus, wait all that, so we're providing that.
I understand that, but that wasn't my question. My question is, how does it benefit the community? And I'm assuming it does, or you wouldn't be proposing it. How does it benefit the community for us to have this list that we're not actually the provider, but they're all private enterprises?
Well, most people would think that a government agency has quality controlled it, and that it's a quality safe program, and that's part of what each one of the PAC members will be doing, is making sure that it's a quality program, they have safety standards, they have insurance coverage, all those sorts of things. So
yeah, if we're going to put it on our banner, that's important.
We as a district stand for public safety and quality, and so we provide that. And we provide convenience, and we help spread the word and help our community members, our organizations in the community as well.
I guess one of the obvious benefits is a unified single list of what's available.
Well, it was to David's point where he was talking about his son, and I did the same thing when my kids were younger. I wouldn't necessarily think, boy, I want my son to go into sailing. But then if I'm opening the pamphlet, I say, hey, sailing.
But I'll tell you where Leonard's going, where I think I would actually be going there too, a little concerned if I didn't hear the part about, let's just do this and make it so Delhi is not involved. To me, that was a key trigger. They kind of said, listen, kind of like a startup company, sometimes they'll launch products not because they think it's successful, but because they want to get bought out. They don't know the true plan, but it makes them more attractive acquisition. I kind of see the same thing. It's kind of a beta launch of our summer program. Long term, we should probably have synergies with Half Moon Bay. You brought it up a while, when we were talking earlier. Yeah, why would we have our own catalog? They have their own catalog. We're competing on things. That wouldn't make sense. But in the short term, I think it's something where we could launch this as part of the workshops and community events that we've talked about. That could all be launched, kind of our soft launch to the public, saying, here, we're having this meeting date to review things. Also have your kids look at these summer programs. To your point, longer term, it kind of scares me in terms of real quick, it would almost require a full-time Parks and Recs director if this becomes too robust, right? But if our goal is just to have a few programs, 100% online registration, very simple, longer term, I think we'll figure out what,
It's a
partnering with
process.
Half Moon
It's
Bay
not
and
a
something
ending
else.
point, what we're doing. And if I can, Leonard, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I wanted to follow up on Barbara's stuff, because I'm trying to scratch this down as we go here. The priorities are kind of going back and forth, and I think I had most of, I don't know, coincidentally otherwise, Barbara, but, we have, for immediate tasks, if you will, for the PAC, I had the draft newsletter and hand in hand with that would be a draft web page, so if we send them up to the web page, the setup of classes online. I also thought, and this is more my thing than anything, we start a liaison with Half Moon Bay to see what they're doing with their stuff. They've got experience in this, and I don't know enough about that to speak intelligently. We've got the medians master plan, or even the short-term smaller plan, and then the associated public outreach. The Burnham strip, once we get our 3 concepts, we'll talk about what your board wants to do with that, go down a pack, and then the outreach. And then Quarry Park liaison, talking to the county about what they're doing. That's right there, 7 items.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Oh.
I mean, I was gonna add to that, right when you say appoint agency to be liaison, I think we should probably do that. You know, just to make it that much more formal, let's have one for Half Moon Bay, one with the county,
Right,
whatever,
right.
you know, one with Cabri, in terms of facilitating that dialogue.
It's
so they-
interesting, there's 7 items and 7 pack members.
The addition is really good. Well, so, a number of those will hit at different times, so that's
Right.
the only way I think that we can do that reasonably. So, Barbara, when do you think the work for the PAC would begin on Burnham Strip?
I'm hoping we'll have plans by the April meeting.
By April?
And then
Okay.
That's all
it
right.
would be for you for your May meeting probably, because he's gonna come
So
to
the
the
board will take a first look at it.
Yes.
And then,
And then we'll send it, you know, most likely, we'll send it to the PAC committee, and they would look for public input.
So my only comment, because you mentioned doing this for the meetings as well, and I will tell you, I am uncomfortable how this process is unfolded in terms of we're paying this consultant and 2 board members are driving what's gonna be on all 3 of their drawings, and then we're coming to the community and saying, hey, what do you guys think of these drawings we paid all this money for? You know, and then they're gonna say, well, we don't like any of it, so now what are we, I felt like this, the Burnham strip, one meeting, it was launched, this should have went to the Parks Committee to come up with the first kind of iterations as far as what we give to the architect to put together the plans, and then we still do those iterations as far as community feedback and stuff. To me, I hope I'm proved wrong, because I am uncomfortable how we have a Parks Committee, but yet all of a sudden we jump the gun to pay a consultant, and we're not asking for their input until after the fact. So if we do it on the medians, I would just like to see that initial input that the architect's taking in, that's being driven by the Parks Committee saying, hey, come up with these, you know, here's what we think for your proposals, and then we go from there.
Dave, if I can comment, I think the Parks Committee likes to have a narrower range of considerations, and so I think it's helpful to have 3 rough conceptual. So these are just concepts, these are not designs, they're not anything like that. Instead of starting with nothing,
Yeah.
I think it's helpful to actually have that, and there's still lots of latitude within those.
Absolutely. I'm just saying, I would have
Open
liked
for
to see
people
that
to-
being driven.
we heard it. Chris has had his hand up for a long time.
Chris Johnson, a member of the MCC, but speaking as a parent and a resident of Granada. Got to jump back about 15 minutes into the conversation, which is that so I'm all for programming. You have to have that element to the community services district. And I think part of the benefit of the programming, especially the initial programming, is building brand awareness. Right now, there's almost no brand awareness for GCSD whatsoever. Now, that's also a downside, I feel, to the programming. So as we look at the priorities, I think you've got in my opinion, you've got a few things already lined up, which is the newsletter. Okay, again, building that brand awareness. Right now, nobody knows anything about anything that you're doing. So building the brand awareness with a newsletter. A side idea to that is to save the dollar on the mailing and use an old school idea. See if there's some kids in the neighborhood that might deliver it for $200. You know, you give them a stack of 500, deliver it for $200. You're saving money. You're getting the kids involved. I know I would volunteer my son to get on that. It's a way to earn some money, and it's that old school community flavor of like there's kids riding around with a bag on their back, you know, throwing a newsletter to each house. So that's a side idea. But the newsletter's great. The website's an absolute. Again, like in this day and age, people need to be able to go there, get documents, get current stuff. And I'm not meaning to be critical, I guess it is, that the website doesn't install confidence right now in terms of the the Parks and Recreation side. So those are a couple things that I think are big priorities that you've already got. The next priority for me would be, rather than programming per se, you guys need to have the big fair, the big event. There needs to be banners, there needs to be flags waving, there needs to be different colored booths and stuff. That's what's missing, for me, the brand awareness, that's what's missing. The big community event where you get El Granada out, everybody's excited, maybe out here in the Burnham Strip where people can see it. But like I said, lots of booths and banners and vendors and stuff happening that will attract people. And this is a big thing. Did you hear about the GCSD fair that's gonna be in 2 weeks? Oh my gosh, there's gonna be all these things. And build that through the newsletter, through the website. Have that planned for sometime in the summer.
What about July 4th? And the reason I say that is because exactly what you're describing was done a few years, like 20 years ago. The one guy, Tim Pond, sort of did all the heavy lifting to make that happen.
I don't know about July 4th because now you're competing with Half Moon Bay and their parade and stuff. So again, like as part of the brand awareness, you've got to differentiate. So I personally am not big on having GCSD team with Half Moon Bay. To me, your market is not south of here. Your market is north of here. People that don't want to have to drive south of Frenchman's Creek to do some kind of recreational activity on the weekend. There's where your market is. It's not in Half Moon Bay. They already have their thing, and it's come and gone, and now it's back. And so I don't know how ephemeral their program is. I've been a vendor for Half Moon Bay Parks and Rec, and that's another reason why I'm not super high on the programming this summer. A couple reasons. If you're a parent, you know that they've already had, you better have already signed your kid up for all kinds of camps by now, or you're locked out. So most families have made their plans for what their kids are doing this summer. So having kid programming is problematic, especially if you're only left with weekends and the kids are playing baseball and stuff like that. So that's problematic right now, especially when you don't have the brand awareness. Two, we don't know what is going to be the programming that's going to catch fire. If it's soccer with Coach Jaime, who I know Coach Jaime, he's fantastic. But if he's already doing that, what's going to differentiate GCSD programming? What is special about the Mid-Coast that would make that programming attractive, especially to the market, which is Frenchman's Creek North? You know, what makes that attractive that's specific to that? So maybe we think about that a little more. That could be something that you roll out at this fair. Like there's 3 or 4 booths, and these are our programming booths, and this is what we're thinking about, and what do you have in mind? Something like that before we go with the programming, because the next thing is, what are the numbers? Yeah, we can get these vendors, but the vendors are going to have a minimum number. I need 12 people to make this financially viable. Otherwise, why am I here? I can do it as a volunteer thing or as a support for the community, but I need some certainty too. So do we have the numbers for as yet unidentified programs? So for me, the priorities, newsletter, website, the big fair, again, banners, flags waving, horns, whatever, the thing that the eye-attracting stuff. And then, per what Patrick's saying, maybe you have one programming event this summer, or something like that. Again, to build that brand awareness. We don't have enough right now, I think, to have any kind of successful programming, but you've got to get that out there, as Patrick said, because that is a key component. We're not just the physical facilities. And I think that GCSD needs to look to the future of, as my vision of it, which doesn't mean anything, but my vision, you're going to have some employees. You're going to have, when you say quality control, it can't just happen in a boardroom in an evening meeting. There needs to be somebody with a uniform that says GCSD that's walking around, kicking the tires of the installations and talking to people.
Well, we actually have the authority to hire a park ranger.
So I'm just saying, you're going to need somebody like that. You're going to need a maintenance person. You might need a publications person. I mean, this is looking 10, 15 years down the line. You're building this to be a Parks and Rec department on par with Half Moon Bay. And that's why, again, I don't think a partnership with Half Moon Bay is the right way to go. I don't think Half Moon Bay has Mid-Coast interest in mind.
Okay, we're running short on time.
Anyway, so great priority
here.
list so far. Good idea, great idea on the programming. I would go slow on programming.
Can I make a comment? Let's not dismiss Chris's idea about sending kids around. 20-some years ago, I worked with people on completely different issues, but they were involved in the Highland Rec District, which is an unincorporated San Mateo, right over 92, just past 280. And at that time, that's exactly how they did it. They sent people around. It's a nice compact district, and they don't have steep hills, but that's exactly how they did it. They had volunteers. They didn't even pay. And they went to every house and passed out the newsletters.
Yeah, and Chris, you
And
made a
it
comment
worked.
about throwing the newsletter. No, they have to be placed at the front door so that they won't blow away.
What about,
Well,
can we negotiate instead of cash for your kid, a free summer program? There you go.
Maybe the
Gail?
board members who haven't said much should talk about their priorities too, before we
Do you
close
want to
up.
hear from Gail first, or you two want to do that? We are running
I didn't
low
mean
on
to
time
interrupt.
here.
You're running it.
Gail,
Yeah.
and try and keep it reasonably short.
Me?
I haven't actually been timing anybody, but
There's two things, one question and also a comment, and I really agree with what Chris said. I think the brand awareness, I hadn't thought about using that term, I like it. But there's a lot of people who don't know what GCSD is.
Yep.
They don't know what and you have to really communicate better, I think, and things like that, especially if you want to reach out to people and to get more input from them on what they'd like as parks. In fact, tonight I was leaving and the neighbor said to me, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to the GCSD meeting." She said, "The what?"
yeah.
Yeah.
People don't know. And also, you really need to reach out to people who are renters. Because a lot of people who rent don't get any information on things like that because their landlord may or may not tell them. 'Cause
I
know-
thought that we mailed out at least one newsletter with a merge of the property owners' addresses and the.
Yeah, we take the
and the-
APN
and-
numbers and translate it to a property address. I'd have to look at it
But-
better,
but
because we
some-
do
somehow-
one thing for the 218 process, because there's
Yeah.
legalities around it.
But I
May not
thought we
apply
took,
to this stuff.
I thought we took the union of the Seacoast billing addresses and the property tax billing addresses.
Well,
Is that the
hand delivery
property?
would get
Yeah.
around that.
I
True.
think that one of the problems, I remember years ago when I was on MCC, there was a gentleman on it, and he said that it was a good example of someone who came here, and he was renting. And he even said he didn't even know that his landlord, you just use the Half Moon Bay address, which is, a lot of people do if you want your mail delivered here. Your address is Half Moon Bay, or if you live in that little strip of Half Moon Bay. And he didn't know that he was not in Half Moon Bay until he went to register to vote. And they said, "You don't live in Half Moon Bay, you live in El Granada." So that's the type of thing I think that GCSD has to get the word out. And the other question I have is, has there been communication with the schools, with anyone in the schools?
Well, I was
local
going to
schools
suggest
here, the school
that
district
one of the
about-
things that we tasked the advisory committee with is going back to the school board. They previously said no, but try and work out something where we can, in the interim, they have this pipe dream of building affordable teacher housing. Never gonna happen, and somehow they need to be made to understand it's never gonna happen. The environmental constraints are too severe there. And so it's really in the community's interest.
I was just thinking of parks, though, not housing.
Yeah, the last communication we
Yeah.
had was Parks. We were talking to them about some of the spare land, but we have not talked to them
Yeah.
since then.
Yeah,
And,
because
yeah.
that's something I would reach out, because the people change, and so you want to reach
Yeah,
out.
so-
If you did it a
so-
few years ago, it's new people.
Maybe a
yeah.
couple select people on the PAC, and Rick Lohman, who was on this board, his wife was a teacher in the district, and until he announced he's moving out of the district, he was gonna work his connections and try and work out something with CUSD. So, maybe the PAC can come up with a plan to get
I
them
even
to
think
rethink
visiting the
it.
schools or something
Hmm?
like that, to giving them some literature, things like that too, at some point would be good. Because you can't, the teachers, the people there, the people who have their kids there, it's a way of reaching out.
Well, I think going directly to the school board may not work, but you may need to come up with some other plan to have it go bottom up.
Well, I just think it's something to put on the list of
Yeah,
all the other
yeah.
things you might want to do.
Well, I in fact had a note to, on the list of things for the PAC is to try and deal with CUSD again on that. Okay, where are we here? Matthew?
Oh, I didn't have my hand up.
Are you
Jim?
willing to, is it still hard 10 o'clock, are you willing to extend it since it's the most people we've ever had this late?
Pat's had his hand up.
Oh. We need to give everybody a chance.
Are you willing to extend it?
Very quick. I agree that many of the camps are already full, but that's, now you know which programs to offer for the future. And there are classic programs that fill every year beyond capacity in Pacifica and Half Moon Bay, so there's no lack of need in the community.
Yeah, good idea, thanks. One thing that I would modify on this list, item 12, disc golf, is that, and you don't have to answer this now, but maybe the PAC should consider whether that is possibly viable on this funny little district-owned parcel over here.
You gotta put it in 45.
You don't hear much about it, but there is a real hardcore set of people that want disc golf. One of them used to work part-time for this district, Lisa Bretz.
They were pitching hard at Quarry Park.
Yeah.
So, but ultimately, I really would like some community benefit out of the district-owned parcel over there. It's something like
What's the name of that road?
Capistrano. It's something like 3,500 square feet. But, you know, we own it free and clear. It'd be nice to do something with it. And, you know, obviously the PAC is going to have to consider safety issues because there aren't a lot of eyes on it.
If you look at the very bottom of this page, you can see that it was actually on the previous list of acquisitions where it really should have been up above. Number 6?
Yeah, yeah. So let me make it really clear, we own that.
I moved that. So can I just ask how we're resolving this agenda item? Because it feels like we've talked about a lot of different ideas. I've talked about my priorities. I think, are we going to ask the committee, as one of their first things is to reprioritize these things based on what they think? Or are we going to send them some specific priorities from this board? And if we're going to do that, then I think the other board members need to really weigh in
Well-
here. I mean, what are we going to accomplish with this agenda?
Well,
item?
let
Are
me
you willing to extend the meeting, or do we have to end it in 3 minutes?
Are there any clocks here that are right besides on a phone? Okay, it's 9:55. How about 10:10 for sure? What I would suggest, and let's see what everybody else thinks about this, is that we basically send this whole list, the original 12 plus the added 5.
And number 6 at the bottom.
Well, moving that to wherever it actually belongs. Back to the PAC, and, you know, because there's some new members, basically reevaluate the priorities and come back to the board with a clear suggestion of, let's start here and do this and work down the list and best guess timeframes for how soon we can work down the list.
So they're going to come back sort of with a sense of what they feel they can accomplish.
Well, they
Was one way to think about
they
it.
and the full district.
Yeah, yeah.
So does that sound like a reasonable approach?
I'd like to suggest that the PAC members, the new PAC members, stay on after 10 after 10. We just decide a date that we can meet this month.
You might want to stand over by the calendar when you're doing that, because this room apparently is a lot more booked up than I realized.
And I'd love to hear just a little more about where Jim and Matthew come in.
My first question is, number 2 on the upper list, wasn't the inventory completed?
I
Yeah,
think
should
so,
have-
yes.
Should have been.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there are others that, certainly number 5, protect the Burnham strip and acquire properties in it that become available. Certainly that's a priority, but that's not something that we should task the
Right.
PAC to come back with a plan to do that.
Well, there's actually nothing for the PAC to do on that.
Exactly. Right.
And the district board previously adopted a policy
Right.
that says we will acquire those when they become available.
Yeah, so a couple of these I think can reasonably drop out. I really like the summer program idea, if it can really be done. It seems like it's lightning fast to me, but if we don't do anything, then we don't do anything. So, and the other priorities I would have are, we have already gotten started on the process on the Burnham Strip property, but let's do median 8, and let's do a trail on number 11, because those will be our trial runs. And it will draw interest and show the community that things are happening, and they're going to drive by or walk through and say, well, who's doing this? Can I help? We hope to say that.
But I do feel like we really ought to go ahead, you know, we actually have the consultant we chose before still eager to do it, and we have other options to go out to rebid, but to do a master plan for what the trails are gonna look like on all the meetings, so that we don't just, you know, try something on one meeting, let's really think through what we want all the meetings to look like.
Well, I was going to suggest that if we're happy with K&K, that we hired to do the concept plans, that we just extend an invitation to them to do that trail.
I think eventually, yes. I think where I'm still hoping to before we get there, I don't need to see the graphics of it. I just need to see bullet list words, you know. This median's gonna have this activity. And I'll tell you one example. You know, I feel like I thought we were gonna be talking more about this, about Boa Columbus Park, and I feel like it's a good example in terms of something that, do we want this median?
What is that then?
This was provided by the PAC in terms of one of their ideas. You guys did all this,
Dale
right?
did it great, this is Dale's proposal, and it was
Yeah.
excellent.
Unbelievable job in terms of pictures and detail.
Did we ever get that up on the website? I know I asked for that when Dale presented.
No,
it.
I don't, I'm Dale Ross
It's
again.
not on the website.
It's not on the website because we had a meeting, I know Gail asked a key question in the meeting, we had several, we got some public feedback, but the work needed to be finished, so that's a version 2.1, I think. And now that we have understanding of what the county agreement is with the district and what we can do and so forth, we can revisit that and turn it into a final vision. But we'll have to go back out and have a meeting with a PAC meeting that gets public input, or go out to the site and get as much neighborhood input as we can to get it to a version 3.3, or 3.0 that we think is really, going to be accepted by the public. So that was done, but then when the problems with the getting a deal between the county and the district came up, that just went over to the side.
Well, it's
So-
number 3 on the list here, so.
Well, yeah, it's a high priority project. It's one of the 2 pilot projects that we want to get done, so that the public sees on median 8, which is the Balboa Circle, what a small neighborhood active park with a few benches and so forth for those peoples and parents who don't want to be active, want to watch the children instead. What could be done that fits into the community, that's not a gargantuan mess, and what can be done. And then likewise, on the Portola median, where you have the little cluster commercial buildings that are the downtown of El Granada and neighboring communities, have that established as a gateway to the park system, available to the community and the communities in our district. And so if we can, those 2 are key projects to establish as a pilot and have a lot of get it to version 3.0 for Balboa, and get it to a version 1, I think, for something visual that people can see for what would happen on median 11. And
Yeah.
then, at that point, we had a consultant in mind between, and I don't know how that changes. Gates and Associates was recommended by Barbara and me to our committee, and then it was passed on to the board, and again there, because nothing could be done on median 11, that's stale work right now too. So we have to.
We need to wind this
we-
up pretty
we can-
quick
Okay,
here.
I just real quick, I'll say, I agree with Mashie, though. I think if K&K does a really good job in the Burnham Strip, they're probably gonna be less expensive, and they seem very rooted in this community. And so I think maybe we go back out for
And
bids
that
on
was
the
some of the
process.
pushback, because what happened was the county, I think, recommended the 3 architects that you got bids
And they were all
from.
very
It's
expensive.
a big, big plan, and this is not
Yeah,
a big.
Well,
but to Dale's point, I think
like
once they do the
K&K.
version
Yeah.
3, we give that to the
I
architects.
think that's okay with us. So
Absolutely.
we had 3 proposals, and we selected one from the 3
Right.
proposals.
So,
But we can consider another group.
Do the committee members think they have a good enough feel for the sense of the board for what to do up front at the next meeting?
I have a couple of things I want to add just in the next couple minutes, if that's okay.
Quick.
Couple minutes, we're going to,
Okay, well, no, because, I mean, I did, a lot of things were raised when I talked to the people applying, that I feel like these are more questions that I guess I'll try to rattle off in terms. One is Ben Forcini still the 9th out-of-area member?
He did not apply.
He did not apply, and okay, so that answers that. Another one in terms of, so back to this, I looked at this, and it was interesting in terms of, I'm in for everything here, I'm in for the way it is even designed, but this could be potentially something where this has so many cool activities, even on weekends, even, everyone's gonna flock to this section, whereas this might be able to be spread out over a couple medians. So that was kind of just a more high-level question, is this something that we wanna go really impactful in one median, or are we more interested in kind of spreading it out throughout all the medians? So one median might just have a pitching mound, a softball mound, a backstop
We
with
need a
some greenery.
plan, and we need public input.
Okay,
And I
and
think
so,
that's what PAC is gonna give your board, is a plan for the median 8, 11.
absolutely, and so part of that one idea is maybe we do a median contest.
Plus-
We get,
But then we
I
have
would
somebody
think-
come and do a plan for us, a landscape architect.
I would also
After
think that
public
a lot of
input.
the things there,
Yes, yes.
and so as part of that,
I
though,
would think that a lot of things there are reasonably easily moved somewhere else as the full-blown plan
yeah.
gets
I think to,
settled.
more importantly, the next steps, I kind of see that it's kind of evolved, where I see everything kind of tying together. I think that we could hold the official launch of the first summer program on the same day as we hold our community event workshop. So that at the very least, a couple parents, their kids are entertained or whatever, while they're, like, I know the library did a good job of putting up their little boards and saying, hey, tell us what you think. And so I think that could be seen as a success, even if we don't have these booming registrations. That day, we pick a summer day, it takes place on the same time leading up to what Chris had talked about, in terms of some of the brand recognition. I think other things people kind of brought up, interesting in terms of some trees need to be removed for safety, other trees need to be removed if we want to get some of these things done. The question becomes, it's interesting, I know I've lived here my whole life, so I have no fear of the, eucalyptus. I know some people, when they first move here, it's like frightening, but I do feel like it is a sensitive issue in a lot of ways in terms of, it's the first step in terms, that's what every community does. They have trees, they say, oh, we need to build more things. Let's start taking down the tree, and next thing you know, it's a slippery slope where you have nothing left. So some type of policy where, whether it's for safety or we're clearing out for space, we're doing some type of
Well,
replanting.
and to your point,
Yeah.
we're not responsible for all the trees out here.
Well, the safety,
It's still the county.
safety issues, but, so first of all, there's some people that say they're negligent on that. Second of all, we are gonna be needing to take out some of the trees if we wanna see some.
If we do a project.
So what's our
But
replanting plan?
any trees that need to be taken out for safety, the county has to do that because
Absolutely.
it's ridiculously expensive
For sure.
to take out those big trees.
And I'm saying, what's our replanting, plan as part of that, I think. Same thing as far as what I'd like to see. I don't need to see the renderings, I wanna see the master plan from the PAC committee with, just the median number and bullet points of what can go there in terms of, certain things, literally, that's all that could go there is a small little flower garden. Some of them are so small, and so, other ones, there's more potential to do different ideas. So I would like to see that level of master plan before we, that incorporates everything, incorporates the Quarry Park, the Burnham Strip, the medians, so we could really lay everything out and say, okay, well, if this doesn't go there, this might be a good spot over here. So I would like to see that. I think the other things that were talked about were,
I'd like a minute from Jim.
Yeah, you really need to wrap this up. And I do have one thing I need to mention. The sewer authority, hopefully construction will start within a few months. We're gonna be expanding the wet weather flow management project, which is the 205,000 gallons of storage is gonna be doubled. And so that construction project will disrupt a lot of the Burnham Strip property.
More reason for a newsletter.
In the vicinity of the Portola pump station, will disrupt a lot of that for probably the whole rest of the year once it gets started.
And for the record, Leonard, that will not start in a few months.
Are
Yeah,
you
I was
sure?
gonna say, are you serious?
I'm relenting optimism.
so would the board be open to holding a median contest, to kind of the initial soft launch, as far as us kind of getting out there with the public to really engage the community?
But again, this is the kind of stuff the board's gonna look to the PAC to recommend to
Absolutely,
you
They're-
guys.
and they'll make,
Yeah.
I'm saying as far as approval of a little
Right.
prize or whatever,
Well,
to really.
they'll come with their recommendations on, what, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
A list of what they want,
To
they
tie
want in the
into
medians,
the-
and then they'll include in that the public outreach, right?
And yeah, and I think the public outreach, I think that's just a matter of picking a date, I think.
And we may need to,
and
for
building
some
up to
of this,
that.
get some professional. Someone
So-
to help us
Well,
with the
and
plan.
that's key. Second, that we, getting professionals on, we hired K&K, that was the first best step we've done toward getting this stuff done. Hire professional marketing people if we need them, web people, that kind of stuff.
We have the funding, let's get some
I'm
stuff done.
wondering if, should we have a regular agenda item on the board meeting agendas for a report from the PAC following their meetings?
Yes.
And kind of in line with that.
And I mean on the very next board meeting agenda after each PAC meeting,
And do it first.
Right.
okay?
So, and even beyond that, when you guys are working on this stuff, email it in the interim to Delia and myself, so we can keep things moving, because then you'll send me stuff and I'll figure out, can I work with you and get this moving? Because we wait month to month for some of these minor decisions we have to make, we'll go nowhere. And I'll be able to see if I think it's a major enough decision, I'll put it on our agenda, contact Leonard, or we'll hold a special meeting, so.
All right,
Good,
That-
thank you.
does that do it?
Yeah,
Going once, going twice.
Good meeting, Leonard.
We're adjourned.
yes.
Dang close.
Thank you all.
Is anyone resigning yet?